The young lady reaches out her hands to the boy, who presses them to his chest in fear. Meanwhile, his mother assures everyone that the child was attacked by a magical beast. After this, the woman begs the holy lady to save her son. Then, the young lady uses her power and carefully heals the boy. Through his tears, the boy watches in amazement as the pain disappears. When the young lady completes the treatment, the young man looks at his hand in amazement. It looks like new. He admires the miracle of healing and expresses gratitude to the holy lady. His mother bows low and also thanks the saint for her help. The main character says goodbye to them with a warm smile, feeling lightness in her soul. She realizes that the temple she is in helps sick and disabled people. Holy healers serve here, and the place itself is considered sacred. All these girls are future saints, their destiny is to heal and bring hope. At this time, the young lady heals a small wound on her hand and remembers that she serves in this temple. However, other saints begin to whisper, saying that her method is strange. One of them says she can't believe the young lady is healing by transferring other people's wounds onto herself. They find this disgusting and claim that she is an imperfect saint because she suffers every day. The main character realizes that her power is truly special. In order to heal someone, she must take on someone else's pain and only then heal herself. But for her, this is a way to repay the temple for shelter, since her parents have long been gone, and this is the only thing she can give in return. The girl decides that she will endure any pain if she can save others, although she hides another unwanted ability. At that moment, someone gently places a hand on her shoulder, getting her attention. The voice says that they have a lot of work to do today. The young lady turns and smiles at her friend. She hugs her and asks her not to pay attention to the evil words of other students. After all, she is always hardworking and faithfully fulfills her duties. That's why they are friends. They always support each other. The main character thanks Ariana for her concern and says that she couldn't have done it without her. She replies that they are friends, and that goes without saying. But soon Ariana points to a young man nearby and asks, "It might be Mr. Galt, but one can't be sure." The young lady answers in the affirmative, immediately recognizing him. She recalls the first time she met him when she first started serving. Then she was terribly nervous and afraid of making a mistake. The boy approached the saint and showed a cut on his hand, asking for help. The girl nodded and tried to heal his wound. But for some reason, the force had no effect, leaving her in confusion. The young lady bowed and tearfully apologized, asking permission to try again. After trying again, she realized that nothing was working this time either, and she didn't know what to do next. Then, gathering her will, she concentrated again. And this time, everything worked out. The guy put his hand on her shoulder and said that everyone has failures. Then he invited her to become his personal saint one day. He promised that he would also work for the future of the country. And he asked her not to lose heart and to believe in herself. These words have remained in the young lady's heart ever since. Galt became the knight's commander, and now she strives to keep up. Now she looks at him with sincere gratitude and respect. Ariana, noticing this, laughs and says her friend is about to glare at him. Rua blushes and denies it. But she only smiles, noticing that there is something special between them. Ariana says, "Rua and Galt look great together." The main character is embarrassed but does not argue, and her friend adds that saints can also love. With a smile, she takes Rua's hands and says that she blesses them both, because she wishes only sincere happiness for her closest friend. The main character, with a kind smile, replies that she also loves Ariana very much, and if fate gives her a loved one, she will certainly tell him about it. The girl smiles and says that, of course, she will do so. After this, both make a promise to each other by intertwining their little fingers. After a while, one of the temple workers runs in, shouting for a stretcher to be brought quickly. The young lady, confused, tries to understand what happened. And soon, with horror, she notices that Mr. Galt is being carried on a stretcher. Her thoughts are jumbled. Why him? She looks at the barely breathing young man and cannot believe that fate chose him for such a fate. Word is spreading around that Galt was attacked by a magical beast while he was rescuing his subordinates. But even the power of the holy healers is unlikely to help. His wounds are too severe, and perhaps the hero's path will end here. The young lady is shocked because it is impossible to believe, and then she decides that she will heal him herself, no matter what. After a short time, the girl enters the room where Galt lies. Looking at him, she thinks that no matter how painful and tormenting it may be, she will still save him. Even if she has to risk her life, she will not back down. Gradually, the boy's wounds begin to fade, and he looks as if he had never been injured. But all this pain is transferred to her. Ida sighs with relief, deciding that everything is fine now. She looks at Galt and realizes she too needs some rest. Returning to her room, she lies down and thinks about how her whole body aches and how she no longer has the strength to heal. Closing her eyes, the girl begins to see vague silhouettes. And then he thinks, are these really the same visions that come before the last sleep? Memories flash before her eyes as if she were saying goodbye to life. It looks like this is how she plans to leave forever. Tears quietly roll from her eyes as she finally closes her eyelids. But after some time, the girl opens her eyes in fright. Could she really have survived after all? Then she thinks of Mr. Galt and thinks that he must have recovered too. She dreams of seeing Ariana, talking to her, hearing her voice. However, a maid who had been looking after the young lady all this time appears nearby. She asks in surprise if the girl has really woken up. The heroine tries to answer, but the woman says that the girl left the ministry, and instead of working, she disappeared somewhere unknown, and the young lady only wondered in bewilderment what it was all about. The maid continues, saying the girl lay unconscious for a month after suffering terrible injuries. No one came, because who would want to visit such a pathetic person? Rua is shocked and doesn't understand what is happening, but hears the woman say that it would be better for her not to wake up at all. The heroine is confused, but decides that something else is important now. She asks what's wrong with Mr. Galt. The maid replies that his wounds, Lady Ariana healed, risking her life. Rua can't believe her ears, but the woman adds that, unlike her, Ariana is a true saint. The girl can't quite comprehend what all this means. Then the maid says she will explain briefly. First of all, Ariana and Galt spend a lot of time together, and secondly, the wedding was announced just recently. A moment later, the young lady is already running down a long corridor, unable to believe that Ariana and Galt are now together. She is in pain and does not understand why everything turned out this way. Meanwhile, everyone was talking about how perfectly suited they were. Galt became the knight's commander, despite being very young. He is called a true hero because he managed to peacefully resolve a dispute with a neighboring kingdom. Recently, the knights again entered into battle with magical beasts, losing many but still achieving victory. And Ariana, the count's daughter, healed their leader, showing the true valor of a saint. Rua thinks that even if Ariana really did save him, her own body still aches. Meanwhile, the other girls whisper that Rua is the complete opposite of Ariana and unworthy of being a saint. One of them says she heard that Rua ran away from the temple to go on a date with some guy. Another adds that it was then that she received her injuries, so she got what she deserved, and this is not the first time something like this has happened to her. They claim that the high priest was wrong to allow her to serve. Such a girl only brings shame to the temple. Moreover, they say Mrs. Ariana took over her responsibilities, and it turns out that Rua is a shameless woman with a hypocritical smile. Everyone is sure that she has now become a disgrace to the temple. One of the girls says that this is the pure truth, because she heard it from Ariana herself. And now rumors about Rua spread through the temple like flame through dry grass. The main character breathed heavily, not believing that Ariana could have spread all these terrible rumors. A moment later, the young lady ran up to them, barely holding her breath. She tried to catch her breath, while Ariana asked if Rua had regained consciousness. Then the girl simply asked her friend to listen. Then she turned to Ariana, assuring him that this was all some kind of ridiculous misunderstanding. After all, they were friends, and once Ariana herself told her something completely different. But she only screamed, indignant at what Rua had dared to do. After this, Ariana turned to Galt, demanding that he help her. At this moment, the guy cast a gloomy glance at the main character. Then he pushed her away sharply and coldly asked what she wanted from Ari. The girl couldn't stand and fell to the floor. In shock, looking at Mr. Galt, She did not understand what was happening. But he only stated that Ariana told him everything, and that Rua was only pretending to be her friend. That she used and mocked her was behavior unworthy of a noble girl. Therefore, according to him, she deserved only contempt. Rua couldn't believe what was happening and tried to remind him that she had healed all his wounds. But, seeing the coldness in his eyes, she realized that no matter how hard she tried, they would no longer believe her. Then the girl wondered why she used her healing abilities at all. At this time, Galt turned to Ari and said that it was time for them to leave. Ariana came closer, lightly touching Rua's face, and, with a grin, noticed how pathetic and unhappy she looked. She admitted that she had long dreamed of seeing such an expression on her face. Then she added that Rua was just a toy to help pass the time of boredom and asked if she wanted forgiveness. After all, they were once considered best friends. After these words, Ariana left, leaving Rua alone with her thoughts. Then the girl remembered the one she once loved, and realizing all her naivete, she laughed bitterly, calling herself stupid. She was always lonely, and due to the stress she had experienced, her hair began to lose its color. Several drunken men approached her, one of whom shouted angrily that the girl was in the way. Another one asked with a grin what the holy lady was doing in such a place. One of them urged his comrades to take a closer look. After all, it's not often you see white hair on a healthy person. When Rua didn't respond, one of the men grabbed her by the hair, demanding that she say something. Then the girl sharply told him not to dare touch her. She grabbed his hand, causing the man to freeze in surprise. Soon he felt pain piercing his entire body. In amazement, he breathed out something incomprehensible. Then he collapsed to the ground, screaming in pain. The others were confused, not understanding what was happening. And Rua realized that this power, the complete opposite of healing, had always lived within her. Now, looking at her hand with a barely noticeable smile, she realized that this was even more useful than treatment. After this, the girl decided that from now on, we'll never heal anyone again. At this time, a guy hiding behind a tree was watching her. There is a legend. Hundreds of years ago, when the kingdom of Zido was struck by a plague, one girl who had the gift of healing saved people, and a temple to the goddess Rush was built in her honor. This temple became an independent institution in which the royal power did not dare to interfere. Girls with a gift like Rush's, they became saints and served people, because it was believed that the power of healing manifests itself up to the age of 10. Usually such girls were born into noble families. The best of them were elevated to the rank of saints, almost equal to royal blood. There were several candidates for this title in the temple at the moment, but the place of the true saint had been empty for 10 years because a worthy one had never been found. Rua remembered that she had once lived in the baron's house before she became an orphan. Back then, she dreamed of becoming a saint. Now the girl only sighed heavily, realizing that several days had already passed. The hair color never returned, and the shock of her exhausted abilities left a mark. She remembered her former friend and wondered how to live on. But suddenly, voices were heard behind them. Someone shouted loudly that this was a defective saint and began to mock. Rua tried not to react, but one of the girls noticed her white hair in surprise. The main character remained silent, not wanting to give them satisfaction. Then the mockers lost interest and looked at each other irritably. One of them came closer and slammed her palm on the table. Then she coldly asked if Rua was even listening to her. After this, the main character only smiles weakly and clarifies whether this was really said about her, and then apologizes, adding that her name is not Defective Saint, which is why she did not understand what was being said. The purple-haired lady asks in surprise what exactly the girl is talking about, not realizing that she is remembering how these same girls used to bully her. They might once have poured water on her or ruined her dress just for fun. But then Ariana always stood up for her, and now the main character begins to clearly realize this. She understands that her friend stopped the ridicule, but at the same time, she herself was no different from them. She simply allowed them to believe in friendship, so that she could then enjoy someone else's naivete. The main character takes a mug of tea and remembers how she once was afraid of these girls. One of them cries out that the rosary is intended for the rest of future saints, and therefore a simple girl has no right to appear there. She then knocks the mug out of the young lady's hands, spilling tea across the marble floor. After this, the girl laughs loudly, clearly enjoying the humiliation, but the main character calmly takes her hand, demanding that she shut up. She coldly asks if she could just shut up for a moment. The purple-haired lady suddenly screams as she feels a strong heat spreading up her arm. The next second, she screams in pain, noticing a burn on her skin. Rua realizes she's used her power again, the one she's always tried to hide. She's able to absorb the wounds and illnesses of others, healing them through herself, but in reality, she can not only take away, but also return pain to other people. And once, as a child, she accidentally used this ability against her own mother. The little girl then decided that she would never allow herself to use this gift again. And now she looks at the girl writhing in pain. One of her friends is screaming in panic for the purple-haired lady to heal herself. But others retreat, frightened, not knowing what to do. One asks the other to help, but she refuses, afraid that the same thing will happen to her. Rua suddenly realizes that the burn she transferred to that lady once belonged to her. Memories take her back to the day they rescued the victims in the hall. One girl screamed that the victim had been wounded by a magical beast and needed urgent help. Rua immediately approached him and used her powers, but enduring someone else's wounds, she felt unbearable pain. Ariana then simply sat down on the floor, tiredly saying that she couldn't do it anymore. She then approached Rua with a request to take on a few more patients. The main character was surprised because she could barely stand on her feet, and Ariana only healed 2 people. But she only said that they were friends and should help each other, right? Rua looked at her, remembering how she always stood up for her, and still agreed. Ariana smiled happily, declaring that she adored Rua. The main character then replied that she loved her too, sincerely believing in their friendship. Now she understands how blind she was. Now Rua quietly snaps his fingers, and the lady with purple hair notices with surprise that the pain has disappeared, and her friend next to her asks what just happened. Rua realizes that somewhere deep in her mind, Ariana has always looked down on her, not realizing how much power she possesses. But this power is truly amazing. After this, the main character returns inside and realizes that everything would have happened anyway. She feels it's time to go to her room. But at that moment, someone calls out to her and asks for forgiveness. The young lady turns around and sees a young man standing in front of her, politely asking if she is Miss Rua Restato. Before her stands Sven Zito Crown, the second prince, known for his insight and refined manners. Besides, he's incredibly handsome. The prince says he'd like to distract her for a moment, since the girl, he claims, knows the secret side of the temple. Rua becomes wary and asks what dark side he is talking about and what he is trying to achieve. The young man extends his hand and, looking at her with a smile, notes her talent, offering to join forces and take revenge. Rua looks at the outstretched hand, stunned, not knowing what to answer. After some time, they are already walking through the royal garden, immersed in the soft evening light. Rua realizes that she has never been here before. The garden seems magical, much more beautiful than the temple. The prince, meanwhile, notices that he gave orders that no one should be nearby, and invites them to sit down. Rua sits up carefully and asks what His Highness meant by the dark side of the temple. The young man replies that in private she can address him simply by his first name, and when they become allies, they will be able to speak without formalities at all. But the girl coldly says that they are not allies, and he looks at the prince with open hostility, but he only smiles calmly, slowly stirring the tea, and then asks what the young lady thinks about the fact that since last year, the state has been suffering losses due to attacks by magical creatures. The girl responds by asking if he wants to hear her opinion, and the guy asks if she finds what is happening strange. After all, these creatures used to live in wild forests and wastelands outside the country, and they could only be found in rare places. But such creatures did not appear on the territory of their state until recently. Now the young man claims that magical beasts have suddenly begun to appear within the country, attacking defenseless people. Then the main character notices that perhaps someone is controlling them and directing them at the citizens. The guy replies that she got right to the heart of what was happening, after which he claims that the one behind this is the head of the temple himself. He adds that he suspects the highest cleric of the church himself, and the girl, astonished, asks if he's really talking about the holiness. She recalls the moment when it all began. When her family was plunged into eternal sleep due to a mysterious illness, it was this man who showed interest in her power. He was the one who first invited her to his place after the tragedy. Now the girl asks for an apology, but admits that she is confused and does not know what to believe. After all, if he's right, why would the clergy arrange such a thing? To which the prince replies that it's all done for control, to make people believe even more strongly, because the more suffering, the greater the need for help from the saints. And the faith of the people, directed towards the temple, becomes a powerful force, comparable to the influence of the royal palace. Thus, the head of the clergy receives unlimited power and can manipulate the country. Then the girl exclaims that this is disgusting, because crippling people for profit and controlling their faith is monstrous. The boy agrees, adding that he doesn't think the clergy acts alone. He says that 3 noble families who generously donate to the temple are also involved in this. At their head is the family of Count Torbius, and the lady realizes with horror that this is Ariana's house, so the friend is also involved. His Highness claims that the head of the church likely made a deal with a man who can control monsters. According to the prince, his spies discovered that this was a certain Yuan from the western lands. The heroine hears this name for the first time and asks if he has been investigating all this time. The young man confirms, but says that there is a matter that he cannot handle himself if she does not help expose the clergy and aristocrats. He extends his hand, offering cooperation, but the girl asks why she should do it. The prince replies that he already told her that she has everything she needs, and it's not about the power of healing. He talks about the power that causes pain, and asks if she minds if he calls her that. He also adds that this power must be used wisely. The girl realizes that the secret of her ability is no longer a secret. She never considered whether strength could be useful, since she rarely used it. But the prince proved too observant. He claims that she will soon have a chance to take revenge on Miss Torbius for everything. The young man admits it's cruel, but they're no longer friends. The heroine apologizes, saying she hasn't decided yet. She asks if he will give her time to think. The prince answers in the affirmative and expresses hope for a positive response. After a while, the girl walks down the hallway, pondering everything she's heard. If all this is true, she can't remain idle. She realizes that there is too much at stake, and a mistake could cost the lives of many. Now she is no longer the naive fool she used to be, and she intends to personally verify the truth of his words. When the lady goes out into the courtyard, she hears someone calling Galt. It is Ariana's voice. The girl asks if he is hurt, to which he replies that he is fine. Ariana laughs, saying that even if he got hurt, there was nothing to worry about. She had once healed him when he was on the brink of eternal sleep, and now she would definitely cope. Galt says with a smile how kind and sincere Ari is. He hugs her gratefully, promising that next time he will protect her himself. At this time, the main character watches them, hiding around the corner. As she is about to leave, her name is called. She turns around and sees the chief priest himself standing in front of her. He asks if she feels better after the recent incident. The young lady recognizes him. It is Frix Ronhatz, the respected head of the clergy, a man of impeccable reputation, except for one thing. He calmly says that he is glad of her recovery, but condemns her unauthorized walks outside the temple. He advises her to be more prudent in the future, and the girl bows politely in agreement. But deep down, she understands that Ariana is the source of all the rumors, since only she could have spread them, although that doesn't prove her involvement in the attacks. The priest, meanwhile, orders her to return to service, since her health has been restored. The girl understands that she is not given any rest and is sent back to work, as always. She remembers how she never left the temple even when others allowed themselves to rest, and she can hardly contain a tired sigh. It turned out the order came from His Holiness himself. The man addressed Rua, explaining that she had not yet reached the level of the other candidates. He hinted that for the sake of her own future, she should work harder and give it her all. Ruwa wondered if she was really worth the effort for personal gain, and soon decided she needed to learn more. After some time, the young lady went to the library and was amazed by its grandeur and extensive collection of rare books. There she realized that she might be able to find more information about what His Highness Sven had told her, and about the origins of the Yuan family. She learned that the distinctive features of the inhabitants of the Western lands are golden eyes and dark skin. The Yuan clan, a small people, lives deep in dense forests. These people speak their own ancient language and possess the ability to control magical creatures. Their distinguishing mark is a scale-shaped mark on their neck. The girl thought about all this and was surprised to realize that she had not known about such unusual facts before. At that moment, someone called out to Ruwa, and she turned around, recognizing a familiar voice she hadn't heard since yesterday. His Highness stood before her, and the girl felt how the distance between them seemed to disappear in an instant. She stood up and greeted the prince politely, feeling a little nervous. He answered her in the same tone, suggesting that she sit down and rest after her search. Sven noted that it was a wise decision on her part to come herself to confirm his words with the help of books. Then he asked if she had managed to make a decision regarding the head of the clergy. Ruwa admitted that she had not yet decided, but the prince noted that she had nevertheless researched Yuan's origins. He then pointed to the young man standing behind him, introducing him as Shiji. He greeted the young lady politely, calling her a candidate for sainthood, and she immediately noticed his golden eyes and dark skin. Sven explained that Shiji Ruben was his loyal assistant, completely trustworthy. He was a native of the Western lands and had been invited to court for his talents. Ruwa realized that such appointments had previously caused resentment, as foreigners were rarely accepted into service. However, she realized that His Highness was free from prejudice and judged people by their deeds, not by their origins. The prince clarified that Shiji was not directly related to the Yuan clan, but had heard a lot about them from the merchants he had crossed paths with. He added that if Ruwa really wanted to know more, Shiji would be able to help her. The girl rose from her seat, bowed gracefully, and expressed her pleasure at meeting him. Shiji confidently declared that he was ready to do everything for the good of His Highness. Ruwa thought how devoted he was, and the prince said that before leaving he wanted to warn her about the possible actions of the head of the clergy. He suggested that if he decided to act, he would do it late at night, when everyone would be asleep, which caused the girl slight surprise. As he left, the prince remarked that she wanted to see everything with her own eyes, which meant she would have that opportunity. With these words, His Highness left, and as he descended the stairs, he wondered with a slight smile whether the goddess he was looking for was really she. A few days later, in the middle of the night, the girl quietly crept down the corridor, deciding to test Sven's words in practice. She slipped out of the room unnoticed, but upon looking around, she did not notice anything suspicious connected with the head of the clergy. Ruwa understood that if she was noticed, they would start gossiping again that she was secretly running away to a man. However, now she didn't care, because she hoped that she would not stay within these walls for long. Suddenly, a shadow flashed in the window, and the girl became wary, thinking that perhaps someone had just passed by. She followed the silhouette and soon found herself at a prayer tower that was about to be demolished but left unattended. Looking around, she noticed the figure of a man standing at the base of the tower. Ruwa immediately realized that it was the assistant to the head of the clergy, and heard him say irritably that the young man was late again. In response, he apologized, citing the fact that the place was huge and it was easy to get lost. The main character was slightly surprised, because the language spoken around her was barely familiar to her, although she understood some things. The mark on her neck resembled the symbol of a people who knew how to subjugate monsters, and now the girl was glad that Mr. Shiji had taught her a few words, thanks to which she could grasp the meaning of some phrases. Meanwhile, the head's assistant ordered the boy to hurry so as not to keep His Holiness waiting. The heroine watched in amazement as the head of the clergy himself actually appeared, and immediately suspected that a secret deal had been concluded between them, which she now wanted to see with her own eyes. The girl realized that if she distracted the guards, she would be able to sneak inside unnoticed. She looked at her palm and realized that by using force with care, she could succeed. The young lady realized she had only one chance, and knowing that the power only worked with touch, she approached the guard, deciding to take the risk. The man cautiously asked who she was and what she was doing there in the middle of the night. The girl calmly replied that she was serving as a new assistant at the temple, but had gotten lost in the corridors and accidentally ended up here, after which she asked if he could tell her the way to the maids' quarters. The assistant to the head, sighing wearily, ordered her to return to the right building and showed her the direction. The heroine thanked him, assuring him that he had saved her from trouble. At that very moment, she carefully touched his hand, and the man suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head. He cried out, declaring that his head hurt unbearably, and lost consciousness. The girl realized she had transferred her pain to him by causing him to faint, and mentally apologized. However, she remembered that she had once experienced something similar. Entering the tower, the girl snapped her fingers, bringing the pain back to herself. She crept among the boxes, trying to make no noise, until she was close enough to distinguish voices. The head of the clergy said he hoped to see the boy's previous outstanding results. He noted that the attack on the village of Mireni was successful. The young man confidently replied that control over magical beasts was easy for him, and the leader would get everything he wanted. The young lady realized that she had not been mistaken in understanding the words about the attack, and now she knew that the head of the clergy was involved in this. She peered cautiously from behind the boxes, wondering who else was present. At that moment, another girl addressed His Holiness, asking him to listen to her. The heroine froze, recognizing Ariana's voice. She heard her ask if she was still a candidate, then proudly declare her intention to take the saint's place. The man replied that the journey was just beginning, and asked how many days had passed since the leader of the knights had agreed to marry her, having barely received a hint. The main character, shocked, covered her mouth with her hand. Now she understood that Ariana had conspired with His Holiness to marry the commander for the sake of the title of saint. Ariana happily said that everything was working out perfectly thanks to his support. She added that the people already see her as the Holy Virgin of Ari and the heroine of the Galta family, and this decision was made long ago. The head of the clergy noted with satisfaction that such popularity among the people would be extremely useful. The blonde lady said that the guy still couldn't forget his unhappy love and therefore looked depressed. The main character became wary, wondering what kind of love he was talking about and whether he really still remembered her. The lady continued, arguing that since they were to support each other, he would have to love her. She confidently stated that she could win his affections. And then, with a cold smile, she added that if not, she would make him suffer, which made the heroine freeze with horror, not believing her thoughts. The blonde lady scornfully remarked that the defective saint was pathetic and impudent, as His Holiness knew better than anyone about it. The main character was shocked and couldn't believe that the girl actually thought that. After all, she sincerely trusted her and considered her a close friend. The head priest, meanwhile, notes that Rua, despite everything, is quite useful, and that, no matter how she behaves, she is essentially a kind and sympathetic girl. The young lady, hearing the word useful, thinks and begins to understand that perhaps all this time she was simply being controlled like a puppet. The blonde assures that if everything continues in the same spirit, then they will cope just fine without Rua, because when she becomes a saint, everything will change. The girl then says the other candidates will be submissive to her like dolls, and the priest adds that the first step is still the use of magical creatures for their true purpose. The protagonist ponders what true purpose means and whether everything that's happening is just the beginning of something greater. But turning around, she accidentally makes a rustling sound. The dark-skinned young man becomes alert, listens closely, and points to the box behind which the girl is hiding, saying that he heard the sound from there, which means there is someone there. The main character is in a panic, wondering what to do, because if she is found, everything will be revealed, and then nothing will save her. At that moment, the prince's servant appears, quickly grabs the girl by the hand and drags her away, not giving her the opportunity to give herself away. He releases several rats, and when the blonde lady notices them, she screams in horror, losing her composure. The young man calmly asserts that this is the source of the suspicious noise that made them wary. Ariana angrily retorts that she doesn't care as long as these vile creatures are removed, because she can't stand anything like that. At this time, the main character gets out of the tower and realizes that for Ariana, she seemed no different from these rats. When she and the prince's assistant find themselves outside, the girl thanks Mr. Shiji for his help, because without him, she would certainly have been caught. The guy replies that it's nothing, because he was only following His Highness's orders and watching her and the clergy. Someone else approaches them and addresses Rua, greeting her in a calm voice. It turns out to be the prince himself, who, looking at the sky, notices that the moon is especially beautiful today. The girl is about to answer, but the prince says that he is surprised by her determination and did not expect that she would dare to take such a risk. However, simply spying on the meeting in the tower is not enough, because the opponents will be able to come up with 1,000 excuses. Shiji agrees and adds that they need to get solid and irrefutable evidence. The prince reiterates that to achieve this, they will have to act decisively and without hesitation. He comes closer to the young lady and says that he needs her strength, and also asks if she herself wants to make them answer for what they did. The main character is lost in thought, remembering her friend's betrayal and how she became a toy in the hands of the high priest. Remembering all this, she just bites her lip and agrees that she will join forces with the prince. She swears to herself that she will never forgive them. The next morning, waking up in her bed, the girl remembers yesterday's foray. She realizes that she acted recklessly, but she is still not sure if she understands correctly what she should do next. Stretching, the girl feels that her body does not hurt, which means that the night's adventure was not in vain. Her gaze falls on the key lying on the dresser, and she remembers that His Highness Sven handed it to her before leaving. Then he said that since they were now allies, the key belonged to her. Rua asked what it belonged to, and the prince replied that it belonged to his personal greenhouse in the palace. He also mentioned that the next secret meeting would take place there. The prince asked her to appear tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and try to make sure that no one noticed her departure. Before leaving, he kissed the girl's hand and said that he would wait, but she thought that he was too smug. Nevertheless, Rua decides to trust him and vows to thwart the conspiracy of the clergy and Ariana. After some time, the young lady is already looking for that very greenhouse, not knowing what to expect. Approaching the old building, she thinks that perhaps this is the right place. She inserts the key into the lock and, opening the door, realizes that the prince should already be inside. And so it turns out, the prince is sitting at the table with a cup of tea, calmly waiting for her. Shiji approaches Mrs. Rua and tells her that they have been waiting for her for a long time. The prince greets the girl and invites her to sit down, calling the greenhouse their secret place. Rua sits down and Shiji pours her tea. The prince explains that few people know about this place because once, as a child, he created it for himself. The main character asks if it is dangerous to show her such an important secret. The guy confidently answers that no, because now they are allies and must trust each other. He reminds her that true partners share their secrets. The girl agrees that she understands everything. The prince adds that since they are on the same side, she should speak more freely and suggests that from now on they be considered friends. The young lady cautiously asks if he's talking about friendship. The prince calmly replies that she can use the place as she wishes, perhaps to read in silence, but she truly does adore books. Then the heroine realizes that His Highness is quite observant and has noticed her interest in the library. He still seems as insightful as ever, and the young lady says with a slight smile that she understands everything, calling him by his name. Afterwards, she asks if they have a specific plan. The young man is clearly pleased that Rua said his name for the first time. He points to a piece of paper lying on the table, and when the girl takes it, the prince asks if she knows this man. The main character glances at the image and calmly replies that she knows this is the same dissolute Viscount. Viscount Rose Redmond was extremely famous. There was hardly a person in high society who hadn't heard of him. He was known as a ladies' man, often associated with numerous affairs. Redmond had a gift for words and diplomatic talent, but his bad reputation completely overshadowed his successes. The Viscount had a mother, but he was raised apart from her due to her frivolous nature. The temple maids often whispered about this. Now His Highness points to his portrait and asserts that this man is the third aristocrat to join the head of the clergy. His duties include using diplomatic ties to trade with the Western lands. However, Redmond is tasked with secretly transferring some goods outside of official transactions. The prince believes all this goes to Yuan's family, and the young lady notes that this family is known for its ability to subjugate magical creatures. This is precisely the price of their assistance. The prince nods and adds that it's good that she understands everything, but there is one more detail. Magical beasts are tranquilized and hidden at the bottom of crates of goods, secretly transported to the lands of the Empire. Redmond is the one in charge of all this, and it is his fault that innocent people are suffering. The main character thinks she'll never be able to forgive such a thing. His Highness, meanwhile, says that if they obtain official documents about the deal, they'll be able to publicly expose the crime. This way, they will have sufficient evidence to thwart the plan of the head of the clergy. The young lady agrees and clarifies that their goal is to obtain these documents, but does not understand how this can be done. The young man points to a scroll with a blue seal and announces that a ball will soon be held in honor of the Viscount's birthday, to which he has been invited as a representative of the royal family. The young lady jokingly asks if he's planning a parade in his honor and wonders if his relatives have neglected him. If so, he's incredibly lucky. The young man quietly laughs in agreement, and the heroine suddenly notices a strange decoration on his ear, sparkling in the light. The boy notices her gaze and asks what's wrong, but Rua, slightly embarrassed, replies that nothing. She then suggests that the prince will accept the invitation, and he confirms her guess. After this, he gets down on one knee and invites her to go with him. The girl looks at his self-confident smile and realizes he's still the same arrogant prince. But, remembering her goal, she nevertheless extends her hand to him, agreeing if it will bring her closer to revenge. And then she declares that she will gladly agree. Meanwhile, Galt sits alone at the temple, lost in thought. Suddenly, Ariana comes up from behind, covers his eyes with her palms, and asks him to guess who it is. The young man smiles and, slightly startled, asks if it was she, saying that she had managed to frighten him. The girl laughs and claims that he recognized her immediately, because Galt really loves her. He sheepishly agrees and asks why she came. Ariana says she has important business. Taking an invitation out of her pocket, the girl offers to go with her to the ball. She explains that the invitation was received for her family, since the celebration is held in honor of the Viscount's birthday. Ariana adds that she is confident that the event will be magnificent and luxurious. Galt replies with a hint of doubt that he's not particularly fond of noisy places. Then the girl asks with a smile if he doesn't want to accompany her. And then he adds that they simply have to go together and spend a pleasant evening at this reception. The guy blushes but agrees if that's what she wants. At that moment, several knights approached them. One of them quickly apologized and addressed the commander. He reports that the warrior injured his leg during training. The man in question stands up and indignantly asks to see the wound. The commander examines her and says that the injury is deep, and if help is not provided, the guy could lose his leg. The young man remarks that they are lucky because Ariana is nearby. He remembers how she already saved him when he was close to death, and he is sure that now she will heal this wound too. The knights say with admiration that they are incredibly lucky, because they have a candidate for sainthood nearby. Ariana is embarrassed and remembers that Rua has been helping her a lot lately, which is why she hasn't used her gift for a long time. The girl thinks the treatment is exhausting, but could bolster her reputation. However, remembering how difficult it was to persuade Galt to go to the ball, she decides otherwise. She apologizes and says that she would be happy to help if she didn't feel so tired. The girl felt tired after a long service. Galt noticed this and said Ari was working too hard. He advised her to rest a bit and let others help, as overexertion could affect her health. He suggested asking another candidate to replace her in the service. After a brief consideration, they agreed and headed to the temple. One of the knights remarked that he hoped they would be patched up a bit there, as their strength was almost gone. Ari replied that the wound was not serious, and there was no cause for concern. Her confidence calmed everyone somewhat, as she looked cheerful despite her fatigue. The girl added that none of this mattered, since the ball was coming up and she needed to choose a new dress. She dreamed of them choosing it together, as she wanted this evening to be special. Galt agreed, but privately he wondered why she was so easily saying it wasn't important. Did she really not care about his subordinate and her own health? But he quickly dismissed these thoughts, deciding that Ari was simply captivated by the upcoming ball. Her eyes sparkled with childish delight, and the guy thought his bride was incredibly sweet after all. The girl began talking about new jewelry, and the knight's commander nodded, saying they had a lot of shopping to do. At that moment, the high priest approached them. Ari noticed him immediately and quietly said that it seemed His Holiness was calling her. She said goodbye to Galt, promising that they would see each other again soon. Finally, she reminded him not to forget their agreement. Galt bowed and watched her go, watching her leave like a ray of light disappearing behind a door. Later, the main character examined one of the dresses, realizing there were only 5 days left until the ball. After they decided to go, she focused on gathering information about Redmond and completely forgot about the dress. Now she was at a loss for what to wear, as she had almost no pretty clothes or jewelry left. Almost everything had been ruined during the cruel taunts, and what was left she had once given to Ariana on a whim. One day, the girl turned to Rua, admiringly noting what a beautiful ribbon she had, neatly tied in her hair. The main character said with a smile that this ribbon was truly special. It was a gift from a woman she had treated during her service, and it was handmade. Ariana marveled that if that were true, there must be only one such ribbon in the world. She added that she'd also like to have one, and the heroine, surprised, reminded her that she'd untied it herself. But the blonde replied with a slight smile that she'd simply been taking a closer look and noticed the color was too bright for Rui. She asked if she thought she'd be picked on again with this ribbon. After all, if this happens, Ariana will have to stand up for her again, and she wouldn't want that. The heroine understood that she did not want to cause Ariana any unnecessary trouble, and she would be sorry if someone tarnished such beauty. So she decided it would be better to take off the ribbon and give it to Ariana. She, smiling, asked if she didn't mind and accepted the gift with visible pleasure. Then Ariana tied a ribbon in her ponytail and, beaming, asked if it suited her. Rua smiled and replied that of course it did, because everything suited her. Now, recalling that day, the heroine realized that it was the first and last time Ariana wore that ribbon. Apparently, she simply wanted to keep it for herself. Reflecting on this, the girl decided it would be worthwhile to go into town and buy herself something new. Candidates for sainthood were allowed to use the funds collected by the church. If a candidate wanted to receive some of this money, she had to submit an application and was given a small amount. However, the head of the clergy was in charge of all this, and no matter how many applications she wrote, not a single one was approved. The girl did not understand the reason for the refusals, and this worried her. Suddenly, the door swung open and the heroine shuddered in surprise, wondering who dared to enter like that. It turned out that it was one of the maids who reported that a package had arrived for the lady. From Mr. Shiji. The girl asked in surprise if Mr. Shiji himself had really sent her the gift. However, it immediately occurred to me that perhaps it could have been Sven. The maid had said that the package was incredibly heavy. She added that she didn't even know what was inside and was indignant at why she had to carry such a heavy load for some Rui. After all, Mr. Shiji enjoyed incredible popularity among the maids, and this girl, known for her coquetry, never missed an opportunity to draw attention to any man. She decides to seduce him too. The young lady realizes her maid is still as brazen as ever, and deep down, she longs to make her feel the same pain. However, she understands that power must be used wisely. Now the heroine is no longer so confident in her decision and, after thinking a little, asks the girl to wait. The maid asks what the mistress wants, but she only coldly remarks that what she said earlier was an insult not only to her, but also to Mr. Shiji. So she waits for an apology. The woman screams in fear, not understanding what is being said or why she should apologize. The heroine explains that Mr. Shiji is selflessly devoted to His Highness Sven, and her behavior would offend both of them if she decided to seduce his assistant. The maid defends herself by saying she wasn't trying to humiliate Mr. Shiji, but simply wanted to offend her mistress. But she replies that the woman's contempt is too obvious. She's even willing to mention His Highness's entourage just to express her irritation. So the young lady asks how shallow one must be to forget one's place. She reminds that the maid is just a servant, and she should not forget who stands in front of her. The woman clenches her fists in anger, but still bows low and asks for forgiveness. The heroine nods and allows her to go. The maid obediently leaves. Left alone, the girl realizes that she simply put her in her place, nothing more. After that, she opens the suitcase, finally deciding to take a look at what Sven gave her. When the lid opens, she sees a whole assortment of things, from shoes and a dress to jewelry. A folded sheet of paper falls out from the folds of the fabric. Unfolding it, the heroine reads the letter. It says the dress was sent to her as soon as it was ready, and that it was made by a renowned capital tailor who creates dresses for female candidates for sainthood. The guy apologizes for not warning her in advance, and admits he wanted to surprise her. He writes that he picked out the jewelry himself, but still hopes he got it right. The girl smiles, but notices that the letter continues. It says that Sven, noticing her fatigue, has obtained an extended leave for her through government agencies. Since the document was official, the temple director could not ignore the order, and now if anyone asks questions, the girl only needs to show the attached permission slip, relax, and not worry. She's surprised to think that Sven has actually thought of everything. He seems capable of overcoming any challenge, because helping others is in his blood. The young lady picks up the shoes and admires the jewelry. Everything looks elegant, but soon notices that there are no earrings among them. She goes to the closet and takes out a box with her jewelry. Opening it, he sees only one earring, the very one that was left by his mother. The second one got lost. Apparently, it happened the day she was helping a boy with his bruised legs. Then she healed him, and then, saying goodbye, ran away. Already in the reflection of the window, I noticed that one earring was missing. Somewhere along the way she dropped it. At that moment, the girl was terrified and almost burst into tears. Now she recalls it calmly and hopes that the boy is okay. After all, it was then that she first used her healing power not for her family, but for a stranger, and soon after that her family fell into an eternal sleep from an unknown disease. When she returned home after her walk, it was already too late. Now, looking at the only earring, the young lady realizes that this is all that remains of her loved ones. But when she puts it on, she feels no longer powerless. A determination awakens within her to see their common cause through to the end. The day of the ball arrives. Sven, as befits his position, arrives first and prepares the carriage in advance for Rua to follow. Shiji watches Mrs. Rua closely and asks with his eyes if everything is okay with her. She replies that everything is fine, but he reminds her that, on behalf of His Highness, he is obliged to monitor her safety and asks her to report immediately if she becomes ill. The young lady nods, a little embarrassed, having noticed how serious he was back in the library. She feels awkward around him. He's cold and silent. Perhaps she simply misses the talkative Sven. She looks out the window and sees the moon hidden behind clouds, which fills her with a sense of foreboding. After some time, the girl gets out of the carriage and is met by the prince. He says he's been waiting for her for a long time. The young lady notes that Sven looks impeccable in his formal attire, like a true heir to the throne. She feels a little embarrassed to stand next to such a brilliant young man, and he remarks with a smile that his assumptions turned out to be correct. She looks truly stunning in this dress and jewelry. He says he specifically selected them to highlight the beauty of her hair. She thanks him for the gift. She adds that she is pleased to hear such words, but still, one should not exaggerate. Once her hair was simply light, and then, due to money and circumstances, it turned white. She asks him with a smile if he finds this transition strange. After this, the guy falls silent for a moment, and then, as if having thought something over, asks whether he really told her about the strangeness. He carefully takes a strand of her hair in his hands, and confidently says that those who consider it ugly simply do not understand anything, because whiteness is a sign of strength. They are a trace of all the pain she has endured, proof of her resilience, and therefore she should be proud of them, because there is no longer any reason to consider them a shame. The young lady can't believe he could give such meaning to it, and his words almost bring tears to her eyes. After all, before, people only made fun of her hair. Now the guide tells her to take a closer look, because their shades match so harmoniously, as if they were made to be together. He adds with a grin that if you think about it logically, then Shiji is a perfect match for her. The prince's confidant is simply at a loss for words, not knowing how to react. But looking at the young lady, he only smiles. After this, he jokingly tells Sven to stop embarrassing Mr. Shiji. His Highness is surprised, but approaches the girl. He notices that she laughed for the first time in his presence, and a slight, sincere smile appears on his face. The guy extends his hand to her, inviting her to go, and the heroine, without thinking, puts her palm in his and quietly agrees. They leave the hall together, and Shiji, looking after them, mentally wishes them luck in the upcoming test. As the couple enters the ballroom, the prince draws Rua's attention to a man standing to the side. He points to him and says that this is Viscount Redmond, with whom he decides to exchange greetings. Although the Viscount appears frivolous, he is actually quite perceptive. The prince confirms that the rumors are true. This man is indeed overly fond of women. The young lady quietly remarks that this seems to be true and expresses a desire to approach, but His Highness advises not to rush everything in its own time, and the girl nods in agreement. At this moment, another man approaches them and, with a slight smile, asks if it is really His Highness Sven in front of him and whether he managed to attend such an important day for the Viscount. Sven replies yes, adding that he hasn't seen the Duke in a long time. Meanwhile, the young lady looks around the room and notices that there are many influential people around, making it difficult for the prince to move freely, so she decides to take action herself. She understands that she should first carefully study the situation, and her gaze stops on one of the maids. The girl looks tired and confused, as if something is bothering her more than work. The main character decides that she will start with her, because she might know something important. Suddenly, someone screams loudly, amazed that Rua herself has appeared at the ball. The young lady instantly recognizes Ariana's voice. Mr. Galt is standing nearby as usual. Ariana says with a slight smile that she didn't expect to meet Rua here. The girl looks at her calmly. She remembers how Ariana once betrayed her, and now she wonders why she and Galt are pretending that nothing happened. The blonde, as if nothing had happened, asks why Rua is here, and whether she really came alone, since it looks like she doesn't have a companion. With the same deliberate politeness, Ariana asks if her friend is alone at such a lavish reception. She then turns to Galt, asking him to confirm her words, and he, slightly confused, agrees. The main character calmly replies that she was invited because of important connections, and, of course, she did not come alone. Ariana asks with feigned interest what she is talking about and, as if by chance, asks where her companion is, adding that the color of her hair has become completely white. She sarcastically remarks that this makes Rua look like an old woman. The heroine can barely contain her anger, remembering whose fault it is that she became like this. But remembering His Highness, she forces herself to calm down. With a slight smile, the girl asserts that she likes her new hair even more than her old one. Ariana only sighs in disappointment, realizing she hasn't been offended. Galt puts his hand on her shoulder and quietly suggests that she leave, since there is no point in being polite to someone who has become the subject of ridicule. The main character bitterly thinks that hearing such words from Mr. Galt is almost an irony of fate, but the blonde at this point only screams, claiming that she is not yet sure whether Rua really came with a partner, and if this is really the case, she definitely wants to see him with her own eyes. Then the girl turns to the main character and asks with interest whether it was this very young man who presented her with such an exquisite dress and jewelry. She also notices the earrings she is wearing, so the blonde lady asks with a smile to show them closer, but the young heroine internally resists. She does not want her to touch her things. Closing her eyes, the girl tries to calm down, not knowing what will happen next. But suddenly, someone hugs her tightly, apologizing for leaving her alone in the middle of the hall. It turns out it's His Highness. He greets Lady Torbias and the Knight Commander, asking if this is their first meeting. The prince remarks that he seems to have seen the venerable commander at the initiation ceremony before, he just wasn't sure. The brunette bows his head in front of Sven, stunned, apologizing for not greeting him right away, and immediately bows. However, the prince gently replies that today they can dispense with unnecessary formality. Ariana, with a polite smile, says that she has never seen him before. She then states her name, Ariana Torbias, and asks curiously if His Highness really came with Ruya. The prince confirms that yes, but unlike other couples, he and Ruya are not engaged. Then the blonde, with feigned surprise, asks what connects the second prince with the orphan candidate. The young man calmly places his hand on Rua's shoulder, explaining that she is indeed an orphan who once lived in the Baron's house. Her parents died early, and after that the girl lived in the temple for a long time, and he learned of her fate only recently. Knowing that she was a candidate for sainthood and had a difficult past, he offered her cooperation in a charity program to help orphans. The prince said that he invited her here as a sign of appreciation for her work and participation in this matter. He then turns to Rua, confirming his words, and she agrees, realizing that Sven had prepared a plausible explanation for their presence together in advance. The girl notices that the conversation has attracted the attention of the crowd, but hasn't aroused suspicion. One of the ladies whispers that she hasn't seen the white-haired lady at a ball before, even though she is from the Baron's family. Soon others remember that her family history was sad. Her parents abandoned their daughter due to an outbreak of the disease, and everyone expresses regret. It is also said that the girl has now become a candidate for sainthood, and the young lady realizes that the prince's involvement in helping orphans only plays into his hands, since charity strengthens his reputation. She understands that the public has reacted to the story with sympathy, and that is exactly what Sven was aiming for. Gaining public favor was a smart move. The girl realizes that, in addition to everything else, the prince has cleverly improved his own position in the eyes of the nobility. Ariana, with a feigned smile, says that His Highness's action is truly worthy of admiration, but falls silent without finishing her sentence. Then she adds that in the future she would like to get to know him better and communicate in person. The prince replies with a slight grin that there will certainly be an opportunity. Then Ariana returns to Galt, saying that her favorite melody has begun playing, and invites her husband to dance in the center of the room. Before leaving, she says goodbye to the prince, assuring him that their meeting will take place again. Galt notices his wife already rushing forward and exclaims for her to wait, but His Highness gently stops the man, placing his hand on his shoulder. He then turns to the commander of the knights, noting that his father was an outstanding swordsman, and now his son is in no way inferior to him in skill and valor. The young knight is embarrassed and asks him not to say such things, but the prince only smiles. He adds that the young man, although brave, is sometimes naive and apparently not very lucky in his choice of ladies. The boy looks up in surprise, and the prince looks at him with a slight smile, as if teasing him. After this, he turns to Rua, suggesting that they move on. Ariana, watching them, nervously bites her nail and decides that she will not allow this couple to remain the center of attention. A little later, she is already twirling in a dance with her husband, trying to look carefree. Meanwhile, His Highness turns to Rua, asking if she would consider giving him a dance. The girl replies that she doesn't usually dance. Then the prince, feigning sadness, says that it's a pity because he would like her to be his partner, and the girl agrees, adding that if she hears a familiar melody, she will not refuse. He checks to see if she really promises and reminds her not to forget her words because he can't wait to dance with her. The young man then speaks jokingly about power and rights, hinting that even the second prince is not allowed to do everything, to which Rua only looks on in surprise. The prince laughs, but at that moment the girl's attention is drawn to the maid she recently wanted to find. However, upon closer inspection, Rua notices a knife in the maid's hand and is shocked, not understanding what is happening. Rua turned to Sven and asked him to look at what the maid was holding. The young man followed her request, frowned, and remarked that the situation seemed odd. He also assumed that the girl had come there not by chance but with a specific purpose. Jaksain. The young lady was surprised to hear who exactly they were talking about, but when she saw the maid heading straight for the Viscount, she understood everything. After all, the dance was about to begin, and no one would be left near him. His Highness then declared that the waitress must be stopped, and the heroine agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, the girl despairingly declared that she had to put this man to eternal sleep, even if it meant paying with her life. She looked determined, as if this were her last mission. However, His Highness quickly intercepted her hand and took the knife, gently apologizing. He calmly remarked that it was not the most appropriate weapon for a waitress, as if trying not to provoke panic. The girl, shocked by his actions, didn't understand why Sven had intervened. But the young man coldly told her not to make a fuss and attract attention. He noted that if this was indeed an assassination attempt, then it was not worth making public what had happened in order to avoid panic and disorder. The prince said warily that her behavior was questionable and asked her to explain what was really going on. After some time, they emerged into the courtyard, where the girl finally introduced herself. She said her name was Charlotte Mayle. Charlotte said that she came from the village to earn money and got a job as a servant in the mansion of Viscount Redmond. She'd heard her master had a bad reputation, but poverty forced her to stay. She had a family to support, and the job promised a steady income. During her 2 years of service, nothing suspicious had happened. However, she soon decided to leave her job because she was planning to get married. His Highness asked who her fiancé was and where he was from. The girl explained that her fiancé was an old childhood friend named Alan. He left the village and opened a small bakery on the outskirts of the capital. Charlotte met him by chance while shopping in town. The prince asked if she was talking about the bakery on the outskirts owned by Alan. Then His Highness added that this must be the Viola Bakery, where he himself had been many times. He smiled as he remembered their cream buns were incredibly delicious. Charlotte asked in surprise if the prince really knew that place. The young man replied that as a child he often ran away from the palace incognito and loved to observe how the people lived. Now he no longer allows himself such antics, but back then he wanted to see the life of ordinary people with his own eyes. The girl said that if Alan knew about this, he would be shocked. She admitted that they dreamed of getting married and running the store together. But as soon as she told him about her intention to leave, Redmond called her to his chambers, and then everything happened. He roughly pushed her onto the bed, and the main character was shocked to hear this confession, because it was disgusting. Charlotte said she felt disgusted and tried to resist, but Redmond hit her and forced her to submit. He claimed he'd been eyeing her for a while and ordered her not to resist, as he said she was no longer pure. He said he was acting on his master's orders and wanted to have some last fun. Tears rolled down her face as she recalled these words and tried to speak calmly, although her voice trembled. The heroine couldn't resist mentally calling the Viscount a scoundrel. His Highness asked if Charlotte had told anyone about this. The girl replied that it had been difficult, but she had confessed to Alan, and the bruises on her body served as proof of her words. The prince asked what the groom had done after that. Charlotte said she'd never seen Alan so furious. He went to demand justice, even though she begged him not to, fearing the consequences for the bakery. But Alan couldn't accept it. Redmond, hearing the accusation from a commoner, merely smirked and used his power to close Alan's shop. The heroine now realized what a vile man this Viscount was. It irritated her that even the clergy sided with him. The prince asked if that was why Charlotte had decided to take such a desperate step and tried to lull the Viscount into eternal sleep. The girl admitted that, knowing all the mansion's secret passages, she easily infiltrated the reception. She didn't care what the cost, as she was willing to die to end her tormentor. She also said that, fortunately, she and Alan hadn't gotten married yet, so he wouldn't have been drawn into her actions. Charlotte hoped that after her death, he would be able to reclaim the bakery and start a new life. And his favorite bakery, the one he always went to with a smile. Now the girl cries out, realizing that if she could, she would fix everything. The main character tells Charlotte not to shed tears, because they have the same goal, and they will definitely take care of her too. She then turns to Sven, wanting his opinion. He replies that if her words are sincere, he too won't be able to stand aside, as it would be shameful to leave a crying girl without help. The main character replies that this is exactly the answer she expected, and thinks to herself that Redmond should get ready. After all, everything he has done will certainly come back to him. They return to the hall with His Highness. The young man says that although Charlotte was sent home, it doesn't end there. Rua is a person who is responsive to the depths of her soul, and is even ready to change her own plans for the sake of others. Then the young lady remembers who recently claimed that you can't abandon a crying girl. Now she confidently says that they need to get close enough to Redmond to be able to obtain the necessary documents. And in her free time, she promises to look into Charlotte's problem. His Highness is surprised. Is she really planning to do this in her personal time? He sees that her desire is sincere, but he is still afraid that excessive kindness will prevent them from completing the matter, although these are just his fears. At that moment, the girl hears a familiar melody and notices that it is a falsetto for Saints, her favorite composition. The prince suddenly grabs her hand and pulls her away. The heroine is surprised and asks what's going on, but the guy just keeps pulling her along. A slight smile appears on his face, and he reminds her that she promised him a dance, which means it's time to go to the dance floor. They start dancing, and everyone around them freezes in admiration. Their movements seem to merge with the music. The guests whisper, admiring the dance of His Highness Sven and the girl from the family of Baron Ristato. Someone notices that Miss Tobias and the Knight Commander are also dancing quite well. However, although their skill is noted, there is less sophistication in them, and Ariana, hearing this, only snorts in irritation. Galt notices her reaction and asks what's wrong. The girl turns to him with a smile, replying that everything is fine. She adds that it's simply unpleasant to see bugs crawling underfoot. The guy looks at his fiancée, puzzled, not understanding what she's talking about. At this time, His Highness tells Rua that she dances beautifully, but for some reason she looks tense and could advise her to smile. The main character shyly admits that she hasn't danced for a long time, and out of nervousness, she can't force herself to smile. When she turns around, the prince notices an earring on her ear. He realizes it's exactly the same as the one he wears. He smiles, realizing that the jewelry once belonged to her. He remembers sitting wounded on a bench, feeling that he had acted foolishly and that luck had turned against him. Then he secretly went into the city, and everything was going well until a stranger appeared on the way and caused trouble. He managed to fight them off and escape, but the boy realized he was still too inexperienced for such adventures. Besides, if he didn't return to the palace, they'd start worrying. He remembered that no one had been warmly welcomed to him in the palace. After all, he was the unwanted second prince. His mother had had a difficult labor, and she had lost too much blood. Even the court saint could not save her, and the mother fell into eternal sleep. The young prince was left alone, surrounded by the contempt and indifference of those who considered him to be the cause of her death. His older brother whispered that his red eyes were the blood sucked from his mother. The boy knew it was absurd, but the words hurt. No one doubted the throne would go to the eldest. Sven himself had no desire for power, but the disdain he felt disgusted him, and he vowed to prove himself worthy of his own strength. From then on, he decided to show his brother how wrong he was, and began secretly going out into the city to toughen up. But fatigue still got the better of him, and one day he felt that his strength was leaving him. Then someone came up to him and asked if he was okay. It was a young lady, and the boy asked in surprise who she was. She looked at his wound and noticed that he must be in pain, after which she promised to help. The girl warned her that the treatment might be unpleasant, but she would cope. The young man was surprised. Was this really a candidate for sainthood? He replied that there was no need for that. He would soon meet a servant and return to the palace, and with such bruises there was nothing to worry about. But the girl exclaimed that it was still worth it, because she was worried about him. She said she wanted him to feel better and, touching his leg, promised to help. After which, she concentrated and began to use her power. When the pain subsided, she said everything was fine now. Then she remembered she had to hurry home and quickly said goodbye. The girl wished him to take care of himself, and the young man suddenly realized he hadn't even learned her name. But for the first time, someone had treated him with such kindness. He thought that maybe he really had been saved by a goddess. and when he looked down, he saw on the ground a small earring that the girl had dropped. Taking her in his hands, he thought about how their paths might cross again. Deep down, the prince felt that that meeting had become a support and a reason for moving forward, an unexpected anchor in a turbulent world. Now no one would dare call him an unwanted child. He had gained power and position, and he no longer had the old threads by which he could find the girl who had given him hope. Only later did he discover the dark corners of the temple and begin to offer her cooperation. Every now and then he was filled with uncertainty. Was she the one? But at the same time, he caught himself in the quiet hope that this was so. In fact, this girl really did turn out to be the person who once saved his life, and for a long time he cherished the dream of that very new, unknown date with her. At this point, Rua turned to the young man, noticing the deep joy visible on him. The prince, in response, maintained a slight smile, recognizing intuitively that her observation was close to the truth. He again imagined the moment when the girl had taken upon herself his wounds, and the image of that event reawakened in him the gratitude and awe that remained from then. Until now, the same pure kindness lived in her heart, but he was worried. Would this softness interfere with her desire for revenge? Would it lead her away from her true goal? If someone had to get their hands dirty for her, he was ready to do it himself, because the search for truth and justice always led him forward and left no room for empty doubts. The young lady had been wounded many times, and now he decided to be her support, not only in words but also in deeds, becoming the one who could protect and support her in battle and in life. He saw himself as her sword and shield and wished for her to remain by his side until the end of the journey. Thus their dance ended, momentarily merging the two into a single picture of movement and mutual protection. Applause immediately broke out in the hall. The ladies appreciated the performance, noting its beauty and grace, and the atmosphere was filled with approval and quiet admiration. As the applause progressed, someone else joined in with a more enthusiastic shout of praise, emphasizing that it was not just beautiful, but truly magnificent, and the hall filled with approval. The Viscount also expressed his appreciation of His Highness's talent. He drew the public's attention to his gift, while simultaneously calling it a bit impudent, a mixture of admiration and mild reproach. The Viscount, standing next to the beautiful white lily, allowed himself to examine it more closely. His gaze slid to the young lady's chest, and in this gesture one could sense an impudent curiosity. He offered to introduce her to His Highness, and the heroine realized how bold that look was. The understanding came. To be alone with him, she would have to play the role of a hunter for the attention of men. The young lady wondered if this was the easiest and fastest way to achieve what she wanted, and the thought of a hypocritical game was mixed with internal protest and calculation. The Viscount noted that the girl was not engaged to His Highness, and remarked that such flowers held a dangerous attraction, the very charm that awakened the desire to pick them. He approached, gently touching the young lady's chin, and his intention to learn the name of the white lily became clear through his gestures and a subdued assertiveness, devoid of outright rudeness. But at that moment, someone placed their hand on the Viscount's arm and asked him to stop insisting, an intervention marked by a slight interruption that changed the dynamic of the scene. The prince claimed that the girl was not his fiancée, but at the same time called her his partner for the evening, thus defining the boundaries and his attitude to the situation. He decided not to interfere further, believing that there was no point in hindering what was happening. The young lady, confident in herself, made it clear that she was capable of handling this challenge on her own and would sort things out on her own. However, the young man looked at Rua for a moment in surprise, trying to understand what exactly she was talking about, and his gaze reflected slight confusion in front of the unfolding events. Rua approached the Viscount with a polite smile and apologized for not introducing herself sooner. Her action seemed calculated and at the same time a gentle touch of social etiquette. Then she introduced herself as Rua Ristato. After this, the man became noticeably embarrassed, his expression becoming younger from unexpected correctness and slight embarrassment. The main character explained that she came to the ball at the invitation of His Highness Sven, while noting that she considered herself only an escort and therefore was not sure whether she was suitable as his partner. She admitted to herself that she would prefer a closer relationship with him, and this admission rolled through her, leaving behind both a desire and doubt about the correctness of such an approach. Now the girl understood that she would like to hurt him right now, perhaps to react to something inside herself. But she understood that the time had not yet come, and patience remained her tool. The Viscount chuckled and wondered if she was serious about intimacy. His grin was not cruel, but rather reflected both skepticism and playfulness. The young lady approached quietly and whispered in his ear that they could be alone later, setting the tone for the room as if to take it as an invitation, while also asking if he would accept a birthday present. The man responded with a grin, surprised by the boldness of such a statement, but at the same time suggested that coming to his room after the next melody be considered an invitation, leaving a hint about continuing the meeting. He kissed her hand, a gesture that promised to enjoy some alone time, and allowed the young lady to imagine that she had a chance for private moments and attention from a man. The young lady left with a slight sense of victory, knowing that her pretense had worked. At the same time, she thought about how difficult it was to play the role of a lover when the heart remained under the control of the mind. She was still worried that she didn't have the appeal to play this game, and that fear was mixed with the relief of having successfully pulled off a ruse to achieve her goal. Then the main character looked at the prince's face and noticed something unsettling in it. She asked herself what had happened and why his smile now inspired more fear than peace. His Highness turned to Rua and asked her to first extend her hand, a gesture filled with symbolism and seeming to cement their common action before the public. Rua obediently extended her hand, but inquired as to why. The prince responded by wiping away the trace of that impudent man's touch, deliberately removing the mark he had left behind. He began to rub her palm vigorously, and the young lady thought with some alarm that he might even ruin the fabric or make a hole with his extraordinary persistence, but his actions betrayed concern and jealousy. At that moment, the guy simply asked where the young lady could have learned such things, and she calmly replied that she simply repeated after the girls who were often around Redmond. The prince stated that, despite everything, they had no intention of leaving him alone and allowing him to be alone with Rodmond. But the young lady then remarked that perhaps an affair would even help matters. It would make him lose his caution, and it would be easier for her to use her ability, since it required skin contact. His Highness wanted to add something but held back. He simply said that was all, and the young lady looked at the glow on her hands and thanked him with a slight nod. The prince acknowledged that he understood she wasn't the kind of princess to be protected, but he warned her to remain vigilant when entering Redmond's chambers. He himself would remain nearby in case anything went wrong. Now the prince has clarified whether they have reached a final agreement. The girl confidently answered in the affirmative and, smiling, told him to simply trust her, the fallen one. Then she added with a grin that she was not a saint at all, but a real villain. A little while later, the young lady was already knocking on the door of the Viscount's bedroom, and the man allowed her to enter. She entered, apologized for the intrusion, and looking around the room, realized that this was indeed Redmond's chambers. Seeing the man on the bed, the girl thought that the documents confirming the transaction should be in another room, and first she needed to make sure of this. The man noticed her gaze and said that he guessed that she would not be able to restrain her curiosity. He took a sip of wine, then poured more and offered her a glass, as if by chance. The main character calmly refused, explaining that she does not drink alcohol, and the Viscount asked if this was true. He grabbed her hand as if playfully and said that if that was the case, there was no point in beating around the bush. Therefore, I suggested clarifying intentions immediately before moving on to pleasure. The man demanded to know why she was really there, and the girl froze for a moment, thinking that he had figured out their plan. Meanwhile, Shiji walked around the mansion, deciding to check the perimeter. Everything seemed calm, and he wondered how things were going with His Highness and Lady Rua. The guy knew he had to be on guard in case something unexpected happened, but he suddenly noticed someone. He wondered if it was Mrs. Torbius, but he couldn't see who was next to her. The cloak hid the figure, but judging by its height, it was definitely not the commander. CJ realized that Mrs. Torbias had slipped away from the reception for a secret meeting, and the place where they were looked more like a warehouse, and now he wondered what they were doing there. But Realizing what this meeting could lead to, he realized that he was too late. Looking back, he noticed that the trail had already been lost. Shiji started to run, deciding that if his guess was correct, he needed to immediately warn His Highness and Lady Rua. Meanwhile, the young lady asked the Viscount what exactly he meant, but he demanded that she stop pretending, and asked whether she was looking for wealth, status, or simply wanted to win his favor for the sake of profit. The girl sighed heavily, realizing that he still hadn't understood their plan, and decided to come up with an answer so as not to give herself away. She also noticed that the Viscount was still holding her wrist, squeezing her hand harder than necessary. The man raised his voice, demanding an immediate answer, and the girl realized this was his true form, rough and cruel. But to use force, she needed to touch his skin. Therefore, it was necessary to find a moment and touch the exposed area of the body with the palm. The girl decided that she first needed to throw him off guard and free his hand, so with a slight smile she said that she wanted something completely different, namely to feel an emotional uplift from the Viscount himself. He was surprised and asked again if she really wanted this, but the young lady replied that, being a candidate for sainthood, she was tired of the closed existence within the cold walls of the temple. She said it felt like an internal numbness, as if life was passing her by. With the Viscount, she could experience this feeling without fear of consequences, and looking into his eyes, she asked, "Isn't that so?" The man burst out laughing, loudly admiring her depravity, and cried out that before him was a rare defect, a depraved saint. He added that it was not strange that a woman like Charlotte did not want to be used, but that was precisely what was admirable about her. The young lady asked if he was talking about Charlotte now, and the Viscount confirmed that she was his former servant. He said that she resisted and remained silent only after several blows, and although her body was not bad, her fiancé ruined everything. A commoner had dared to interfere, causing a great deal of trouble, and the Viscount had dismissed him as an impudent commoner. The girl realized how disgusting this man was. She swore that his retribution would be merciless, and said that she was not like Charlotte. Then the Viscount unclenched his fingers, released her hands, and, grabbing the fabric, tore part of her dress, mockingly asking if she would entertain him. The main character put her hand on his shoulder and softly said that, of course, they would have fun. But as soon as she activated her power, the Viscount felt a burning itch spreading throughout his body. Red spots appeared on his back and he began to scratch himself furiously, screaming in irritation. The girl calmly said that the wine was poisoned, and now he only feels itching, but soon the condition will become unbearable. She added that she wasn't going to give him the antidote. In a few minutes, he'd fall asleep forever. The man turned pale, stricken with fear. In fact, the heroine knew that this was just her trick, but the effect was similar to a skin disease that she had encountered before. This affliction caused excruciating itching, although it was not life-threatening, but the Viscount was too stunned to reason. The girl understood that she had no opportunity to add poison, but his panic played into her hands. The man could no longer think clearly. The Viscount cries out in despair, demanding that she stop immediately and give him the antidote, otherwise everything will end terribly. But the young lady calmly remarks that she knows about the documentation related to his secret trade with the West, and the man, amazed by this, does not understand how she could have found out about this. The girl demands to know where the papers are, but the Viscount snaps, declaring he won't tell. Then she calmly replies that he no longer has a choice. She didn't want to take things to the extreme, but circumstances forced her to. The Viscount, in a panic, begged her to wait and confessed that the documents were hidden in the next room, his office. The lady asks where exactly the papers are in the office, and the man says with difficulty that they are in a drawer in the desk, which is locked. The key, he says, is hidden behind a painting. After this, the Viscount screams again, feeling his body itch unbearably, and demands an antidote. But the girl realizes she doesn't have one. Instead, she takes a piece of paper out of her pocket and notices that the matter is not yet finished. After all, she needs a seal and signature on this document. The young lady hands the paper to the trembling Viscount, waiting for him to sign it. The man, running his eyes over the lines, asks in bewilderment what kind of meaningless nonsense she has slipped him. The girl explains that it's a document of compensation for damages to Charlotte Mail, the one he disgraced. She guesses that Sven drew it up right there on the spot. The guy then suggested adding another 0, or even 2, to the sum, since suffering cannot be measured in numbers. The Viscount screams in rage, considering this absurd, because, in his opinion, we are talking about just a former servant, not worthy of such attention. But, glancing at the sum, he is still astonished by its magnitude. The lady calmly remarks that he also destroyed her fiancé's business, and that this, too, is included in the compensation. And that's far from all she knows. The girl claims to have conducted her own investigation and discovered that there were many victims, and some women even became pregnant and then found themselves thrown out onto the streets. Now the heroine says that she would like to include child support for these children in the bill, because Charlotte's words are only a small part of the whole truth. In conclusion, the lady says that human life should not be measured by wealth, and asks if he understands this even now. The Viscount then only swears, and the young lady tells him to quickly put his seal and signature, after which the man does it anyway, and when he puts his stamp on it, he hands her the document and asks the girl if this is what she wanted. The main character then looks over the document and replies that undoubtedly, and the man then cries out that if she is satisfied, then let him give her the antidote. But the main character then says that, alas, it does not exist. And the man then looks at her in shock, and the young lady claims that he will slowly fall into eternal sleep, regretting what he did. After which she leaves the room and says goodbye to Viscount Redmond, and also claims that the night with him was very unpleasant. But the man then cries out that everything can't be like this, and even though the girl doesn't leave, his body still itches a lot, and he cries out that he doesn't want to fall into eternal sleep. Well, then he does lose consciousness, and the young lady then thinks that perhaps she scared him too much. And apparently fear overcame the itch all over his body, because the guy fainted from this, so what a pathetic man he is. But the young lady understands that in any case, everything is settled with Charlotte, and all that remains is to get the documents about the deal with the West. His Highness meets the girl at the exit and says that she did a good job, and also states that he is glad that she is okay. The young lady then says that Sven has arrived, and the guy replies that of course, and it looks like things are going well. But then he is shocked and tells her to wait and asks what happened to her dress. After which he gives her his cape and tells her to put it on and cover the front part properly, after which he says that this is the work of Redmond. And this man is simply terrible, so His Highness asks how he can deal with him, and the young lady then thinks about what he is talking about and claims that she has already dealt with him. After which he says that they should quickly pick up the documents, since they are in the next room. His Highness then turns to the young lady and states that he wants her to take better care of herself, but then the young lady then says that that was indecent. After which he apologizes, and the prince only becomes embarrassed, and then claims that he didn't mean it that way. After which he also turns to the young lady and states that he has made sure that everything becomes clear from now on. And the main character, watching him leave, thinks what does it mean to be clear, and the whole guy is so strange. After that, they go into that very room, and the young lady says that the key is behind the painting, and the documents are in the drawer of the desk. Then they take the picture, and there really is a key there. After which they open the chest of drawers and keep the documents. The prince then claims that this time he was not the main actor in the play, and thanks to her the goal was achieved. After which His Highness folds the paper and puts it in his pocket, and the young lady then says that they need to leave quickly, but at that very moment Shiji bursts into the room and addresses His Highness. He cries out that he knew he was still here, and the prince then asks Shiji if it was him, and then asks why the guy is so disheveled. His Highness, confidant, then asks for forgiveness but claims that he has an urgent report. After all, he witnessed Mrs. Torbius's secret meeting with someone, and it happened in front of the warehouse. The main character then wonders if it was Ariana, and the guy then claims that this is just his assumption. However, perhaps this man is from the Yuan clan, and it looks like he has been hiding all this time. And also speaking about the magical beasts that will be brought to their country, if they are sent to Redmond's warehouse, things are bad now, and at the same moment they hear piercing screams. The main character then asks what happened, and Shiji only gets angry and claims that it seems the worst assumption turned out to be true. After which His Highness and the main character go out onto the terrace and see people running away in horror. And in the middle of the room there appears a large monster. The main character now screams that this must be Ariana's doing, and the girl thinks what the purpose of all this was. After which the young lady sees Ariana herself, who is watching all this horror with a smile on her face. The main character understands that allowing magical beasts to attack the estate was originally part of the head of the clergy's plan, because by healing all the wounds they received, they would be able to win the faith of these people. And even if the aristocrats swore allegiance to the royal family, it is highly likely that the temple's excessive authority would arouse fears, and the possibility of their plan being discovered would also arise. Ariana understands that it is necessary to choose in advance the estate that will be attacked, and of course their plan did not include an attack on the house of Viscount Redmond. But now the girl, with a smile on her face, says that only aristocrats have gathered today, and that it would be a sin not to take advantage of such an opportunity. But since the magical creatures had been hidden right in the warehouse for centuries, it was still a very rash decision, and she would have to apologize to the Viscount. But then the girl, with a smile on her face, thinks to herself, let her cute little creature attack. But she also tells him to just keep calm and try not to put them into eternal sleep, because when she returns to the temple, she'll have to heal them all, but only if she so desires. Well then, the young lady tells him to do all this, except for the white-haired girl. The blonde also recalls how she talked with the guy who knows how to control this monster and asks if they had come to an agreement, and also whether he could order the beast to be cruel only to the white-haired girl. That's why now she smiles and thinks how wonderful it is, after which she realizes that Rua is pathetic and unhappy, but at the same time full of self-importance. If she were useful and remained her obedient toy, the girl would allow her to live and continue the game. But now the blonde screams for the monster to tear this idiot into small pieces. At this point, Galt was simply shouting for everyone to remain calm and not panic, and to run. He also shouted that the main entrance was blocked and that they should quickly evacuate through the back door. However, when the monster began to roar, the aristocrats were simply shocked and began to run around in panic. And the guy understood that they were consumed by panic, so the evacuation was not progressing, but if he had a ball, he could fight the beast. However, Ari said that the sword was not suitable for the reception, and he should have insisted on his own, so the guy thinks that he should quickly find Ari, who disappeared during all this, and now the young man hopes that she is safe. The main character is descending the stairs at this time, but looking at all this commotion, she screams that there will be so many victims, and all this is the work of Ariana. His Highness then asserts that she did it without hesitation. The prince then turns to Shiji, who then tells His Highness that he prepared everything, and then hands him the sword. The prince then claims that the sword is his favorite, and that he left it in the carriage. Shiji then claims that he was just on his way to see His Highness, and decided to take it just in case. And the prince then says that, as he thought, an excellent subordinate can rescue them from this difficult time. But the main game is gone, and he cries out, "Is it really true that he will fight this creature? It's dangerous, isn't it?" But the prince then claims that he is quite good at this, so that he is not inferior even to the commander of the knightly order. Sven also turns to his subordinate and asks if he also brought a weapon, and the guy replies that, of course. After which, His Highness tells the guy to find a person from the Yuan clan, because if he controls the magical beast, he must be somewhere on the estate's territory. And when the guy finds him, let him arrest him, and then Shiji tells His Highness that he will do as he orders. The man then turns to Rua and tells her to take these documents and kill. The girl then takes the paper, but claims that she cannot escape alone. And the guy then says that she is smart enough to understand that this is the best decision. And the girl replies that yes, but when she wants to say something, who understands that in such a fight she will undoubtedly only be a hindrance, but since Ariana is on the side of the person from the Yuan clan, she is sure that this girl will give the order to attack her. And this girl will definitely do it, and the main character understands that she probably can't use it against her, but the potential of her power is worth checking. His Highness at this time understands that Shiji will take on a person from the Yuan clan, and Rua will escape danger, but when he looks back at the monster, he thinks about how he can defeat this monster. The guy understands that the commander is helping people escape, but the evacuation is not going well, and it's hard to swing a sword when there are so many people around, and the prince then thinks that first he needs to take the beast to an open space away from people. But the main character at this time tells Sven to wait, because she has a plan. Then, a little shocked, she cries out that Rue needs to get away from there quickly. However, the main character then confidently replies that she won't run away and asks Sven to listen to her. After which the young lady tells her plan, but His Highness, in shock, asks what she is saying and whether she is in her right mind. After all, how can he allow her to do something dangerous? However, the young lady then puts her finger to the young man's lips and says that if she were in her right mind, she would not become anyone here. And the young man then takes her hand and asserts that the girl always exceeds his expectations. After which he says that okay, and he understands. After which he suggests following her plan again. And afterward, the main character thanks Sven for accepting her. They both insist he simply wants to quickly play a central role in their plan. At this time, Galt is just heading down the corridor and realizes that during the entire evacuation, Ari never showed up. It's good if she already managed to escape. At this moment, one of the women falls, tripping over her dress. And the monster, seeing her, remembers the blonde's words that he needs to attack the lady with white hair, so the monster now begins to growl with all his might and prepares to attack the woman. Galt then tries to remove her and tells her to be careful. But after this, the young lady only claims that the monster needs to attack not this woman, but her. After which the monster immediately turns his gaze to the young lady, and Galt then screams for her to be careful and run. The young lady then realizes that, as expected, the monster reacted to the white hair and the Yuan clan man can control magical creatures. But they cannot recognize people, and if Ariana orders the beast to attack her, she will tell him the color of her hair, and the young lady thought so because she understands a little about the course of her thoughts, since they are former friends. His Highness then says that Rua saved him by moving the monster aside. He then delivers a single, precise blow to the monster's neck, causing it to cry out. The young lady then touches the monster and begins to use her ability. The monster only whines and then falls to the floor, and the main character, looking at her hand, realizes that it worked. And the transfer of the intoxication symptom also worked on the animal, so this time she transferred the hangover. His Highness, meanwhile, turns to Rua and says that everything worked out because she acted as bait, and he brought down that monster. Or rather, he pretended to be ready, saying that in the end, it was she who subdued that monster. After which, the guy turns to the young lady and says that everything is as planned, and the main character replies that it is all thanks to the fact that he trusted her. At this time, everyone in the hall begins to clap and claim that His Highness Sven has pacified the beast, and as expected from His Highness, he did it. And how bravely the girl acted, becoming bait. Galt is watching all this at this time and realizes that this girl looks like Miss Restado. Ariana at this time is only angry and understands that she still did not manage to do it, and the girl thinks how useless these monsters are. After which she realizes that she needs to use Plan B. The guy who was controlling the monster at that time is in shock, looks and thinks why it is not moving, and whether the beast has really suffered the situation, after which he understands that he needs to leave quickly. But at that very moment, someone puts a sword to his neck and claims that he doesn't think the guy will succeed. It turns out to be Sir Shiji, and he claims that, on orders from His Highness, he will not allow this guy to escape, after which he advises him to confess on whose orders he acted. While everyone in the hall is clapping, one of the guys comes into the hall and claims that the hair color is different. However, he then asks if it really is Mrs. Rua. During the attack by the magical creature that happened at Redmond's ball, there were no serious consequences. Only a few people received minor injuries, so the matter was kept under wraps. The man of the Yuan clan, who controlled the beast, was caught, and the fact that Redmond was one of the culprits in the attack of the magical creatures. It was made public before the aristocracy in the hall and was supported by documentary evidence. The Viscount was arrested on the spot, and if the existence of a behind-the-scenes mastermind is revealed, the crime of the head of the clergy and his associates will also not be able to be hushed up forever. Now the young lady is sitting at the table and saying that the carriage in which Redmond and the man from the Yuan clan were being carried was attacked by robbers, and the man was plunged into eternal sleep. And even though Redmond managed to escape, he lost his mind. Currently, the man in prison is no different from a mentally disabled person who can't even string a few words together. The young lady understands that her threats were not the turning point, and her ability was only a threat. But this time he really believed that he would be put into eternal sleep and went crazy. So now the main character thinks about the escaped enemy and understands that the head of the clergy probably hired them. The prince then replies that he believes this is so, but he is alarmed that everything happened too quickly, and perhaps Miss Tobaraz had prepared the mercenaries in advance as insurance in case she failed. The young lady then thinks that Ariana is still as treacherous as ever, and Shiji claims that he should have accompanied the carriage instead of leaving her as a knight and that it was unwise of him. After which the guy bows and asks for forgiveness, but His Highness then replies that no, and they should have avoided participating in this matter, even if it meant allowing the knights to take all the laurels for themselves. But there is still one more person from the Yuan clan, and the probability that he will appear at some meeting is still not zero, and it was his decision to exclude Shiji from the mission. So the guy doesn't have to worry because he did everything right. Shiji then replies that it is fine, but says that His Highness does not have to say such things. Meanwhile, the prince claims that the losses from magical creatures should disappear for a while, since they have thwarted one of the enemy's plans. The young lady claims that this is logical, but thinks that as for Charlotte, she received the money from the confiscation of Redmond's property. As planned, they also found out that Redmond's wife and son were not involved in his plans, and they moved to the woman's family estate so they did not have to live in poverty. And the young lady thinks that at least there is something good in this, after which she smiles, but then asks what their next enemy is. And the young lady asks if they will deal with the next aristocrat who cooperates with the head of the clergy. The prince then replies that he would like to, but first, his father gave Rua an invitation and he wants him to bring the girl to the audience. The main character then realizes that this thing is His Majesty the King, and now she is shocked and asks if this is really true. Ariana at this time is just angry in her room and beating her pillow, screaming how crap it is. The girl understands that the attack of the magical beasts failed, and although the mercenaries who attacked the carriage did a good job, His Holiness reprimanded her and insisted that she not act willfully and sit quietly for a while. That's why now the girl is wondering if he's angry with her, but then she screams that she didn't do anything wrong and it's all Rua's fault, so now she asks what kind of nonsense this is. The girl still didn't expect that Rua would act so bravely and voluntarily become bait for the beast, but everyone applauded and fussed over her like she was a written-off bag. So now the blonde is very angry and understands that this girl is just a defective holy orphan, and she thinks how much she hates her. But then she lies down on the bed and thinks about letting Galt spoil her. Well, the girl also understands that there is something to it. The way he talked to her after the ball, it was as if he was in the clouds. And now the girl screams that she is so angry that it is as if she is about to plunge into eternal sleep. At this time, the maid enters the girl's room and asks for forgiveness, but claims that she has messages from the head of the clergy. The blonde then jumps out of bed and asks what she's talking about, wondering if this man has finally forgiven her. The maid then insists it's about the annual celebration that will take place in the coming days. And the young lady realizes that she remembers something similar. After all, they gather candidates for sainthood there. And perhaps she has another chance, which is why the girl is asking now. Could the maid clarify something? Sven's older brother is sitting at his desk at this moment. Well, then he looks at one of the papers and wonders if this is really a report about the incident at Viscount Redmond's estate. That Sven played a key role in this is why now his older brother just winces and says that this guy is at it again. At this point, someone enters the room and apologizes for interrupting Mr. Sarid's work. The young man then turns to Diana and asks what happened, and the woman then says that's the thing. However, when she sees the guy's face, she screams at him to stop wincing. After all, with such a face he will scare away all his subjects, so let him smile a little. And then the woman asks why he doesn't follow the example of his younger brother. However, the guy then asks if she really claims that he is more suitable for the role of the next ruler. Well, the lady with green hair then claims that no one says such things and insists that he immediately stop being so gloomy. After all, she's his fiancée. And after that, the guy just turns away and falls silent. And Diana then tells him to listen to something else and claims that tomorrow a girl will appear who will be a candidate for sainthood, and she will sort out everything about that incident, together with his brother. Sarid then frowned and said that he was looking forward to the meeting with such a famous person, and Diana at this time replies that however he should be very eager to meet her. It was Lewis. The guy then says that he believes Mrs. Rua is an important person to him. At this time, the head priest is throwing papers around in his office and screaming that this Ariana is a capricious girl. She does whatever she wants, and he asks if she's going to derail his carefully laid plans. But then one of the servants turns to His Holiness and asks him to calm down, because Ariana has already dealt with this problem by sending mercenaries. And the high priest then says that she hired mercenaries for money, and another priest then claims that soon the annual ceremony will take place and henceforth the girl will obediently follow all his instructions. The man then replies that if this is how it will be, then everything is fine, and for this he must nominate this naughty girl as a candidate. The man with red hair then tells His Holiness that everything is correct, and the man then thinks that, however, he could not have imagined that His Highness Sven and Rua would tame the magical beast, and it is quite likely that the young man found out about his plan, and Rua most likely happened to be nearby by chance. However, be that as it may, Redmond has become useless and he will no longer use magical beasts, so now the priest thinks that no matter how much he would like otherwise, he will have to neglect some details of the plan in order to complete it faster. At this moment, someone enters the office and apologizes, then asks if the head of the clergy is there. It turns out to be Galt. And now the priest turns to the commander and then asks what made him come to him. The guy then states that, in general, he would like to ask him a few questions regarding a certain candidate for sainthood. But the man then interrupts the guy and asks if it is urgent, after which the young man replies that there is no urgent matter. But the priest then sends him away and asks for forgiveness, but claims that he has business and suggests discussing it another day, after which he says goodbye. Galt, after seeing the closed doors in front of him, understands that there is nothing he can do if he is busy. The boy then realizes that he wanted to know more about Rue Ristato, and he wonders if the girl is really such a terrible person, as Ariana says. After all, at that moment she acted honorably, even beautifully. But then the young man begins to shake his head and realizes that he can't be trusted to think such thoughts. Well, when he passes by one of the windows, he looks into it and again thinks about Lady Ristato. At this time, the main character is walking down the corridor and realizes that she cannot believe that the day of the audience has arrived. And the girl understands that His Majesty simply wants to reward her for her help in the incident at Redmond's estate, and Sven said that everything would be exactly like that. He also gave her a dress for the reception again, and the young lady is now wondering how this could not be good news. But the girl also thinks this feeling of being watched from everywhere is a little unnerving. The maid is then asked if this is the same Rua Ristato who fought the magical beast. And she defeated such a terrible beast, so it's amazing, and the girls also say that this dress suits her very well. The men also talk among themselves, and one of them claims that Duchess Peridot said that this girl saved her, and his interlocutor claims that the feat of the candidate and His Highness Sven has become a subject of discussion at many receptions. The young lady then thinks that these rumors are not so bad, but she wonders if the other candidates feel uncomfortable because of the increased interest in her person. One of the men then claims that he thinks she will become the Rose Princess at the ceremony in honor of the goddess Rush this year. And the main character then understands that this is true, and soon everything will consist of a ceremony in honor of the goddess Rush. The girl understands that this is essentially an annual national holiday held in honor of Rush's birthday, and the main character at the event should be the current saint. However, at the moment her place is empty. Therefore, the two best candidates for sainthood are chosen, one from the temple and one from the royal family. Two girls who perform their duties to the people admirably are called the princesses of the Rod of the Year. The young lady understands that this title was named so because of Russia's love for roses, and therefore there is a rose garden in the temple garden, which serves as a resting place for candidates. The people also eagerly await this sacred holiday, since the temple is one of the country's governing bodies. Yes, and besides the rose princesses, the candidates for sainthood almost always play a background role. And as for the main character, she was something like a servant every year. While Ariana has been nominated by the temple for the role of Rose Princess for 2 years in a row, and it looks like it will be the same this year. The royal family has nominated children of high status, so this year the girl understands she'll be back behind the scenes. And it's unlikely Sven will even mention her name, unless it concerns revenge. Well, then the girl goes into the garden and realizes that Sven told her that the path to the place of audience lies through this garden. However, at the same moment, the maid, who is at the window, pours water from the bucket right at the main character, and when you turn around, the maid is already running away. The young lady notices only part of her hair and wonders if it's a girl, then assumes it's no accident, but wonders if it was Ariana's doing. However, the main character understands that it is not her after all, because the girl would not engage in such petty hooliganism, and, moreover, this thing is the royal court. But then the main character realizes that it will take time to dry out, so she thinks about what to do. At this time, Sven's older brother notices her and says that she is probably a candidate for sainthood of Ruorestado. But then the guy just looks at her angrily and asks what the girl is doing in such an ugly state in the royal palace. The young lady then realizes that His Highness Sarid Zito Crown is the crown prince, and also Sven's brother, and she has heard that both brothers have outstanding abilities. But now the girl thinks about how cold her older brother's look is, and he values good manners very much, and is also strict with himself and others, so it's not for nothing that he is called the Prince of Ice and Snow. And maybe they look similar to Sven, but in other ways they are very different, and now the prince asks what happened, and also claims that he is listening. After which he asks why she is standing there like that, and let her immediately name the reason why she is dirtying the royal garden. The main character then bows and asks for forgiveness for being there in such an unsightly guise. After which she says that this is because, but still thinks whether she can tell the truth about someone pouring it on her, but then the girl understands that it is impossible, because one careless fact will become the reason for unfriendly assumptions, and her ill-considered statements can drag down Sven. So now the young lady says she apologizes for spilling water on herself due to her carelessness and claims she will change her dress right away. But the prince then says that this does not suit him, and the girl is shirking responsibility. And the guy then asks why his brother is spending time with her, because he needs to find out before the girl meets her father, after which he tells her to come over. But at that very moment, someone shouts out Sarid's name, and it turns out to be his wife. The girl claims that she observed what was happening, and the way he approached the girl in wet and cold clothes was completely rude. The guy then turns to Diana and tries to justify himself, but the girl screams that there is no need to justify himself, because first of all he should have taken care of her, because what if she catches a cold? And as a future king, he must learn to consider his actions. The main character, observing all this, understands that the terrible Prince Sarid has just. He began to look like a naughty puppy, and the girl wonders who this energetic little girl is. The girl at this time apologizes for such treatment and then claims that her name is Diana Peridot, and she is the fiancée of Prince Sarid. The young lady then realizes that she has heard of such a family name and that it is, after all, a ducal house, and this lady is the future queen. So now the main character apologizes, looking terrible, and claims to be Rua of the Restado house. The lady with green hair then replies that she knows and was just about to thank the girl, but the young lady then asks what she should thank her for. However, Diana then says that first she needs to change her clothes, and she thinks that there is no time to return to the temple, so she will take her to her room. Sarid then, in shock, tells Diana to wait, because inviting a candidate for sainthood whom she barely knows is too much. However, the girl then replies that everything is fine and she knows that Rua helped Sven in the recent incident and asks him to notice that she is doing a good deed, so she asks the guy not to interfere if he himself is not able to help. Sarit then only falls silent, and the main character then thinks that His Highness Sard is under the thumb of his bride, and it's surprising how the girl is not shy with him, and perhaps this means that they really have a good relationship. At this time, Diana turns to the young lady and invites her to go. A little while later, the main character is already changing into one of the dresses, and the lady with green hair says that it suits her very well. The girl claims that she wore this dress a long time ago, but it fits Lady Rua perfectly. The main character then tells Lady Diana that she still cannot accept him. However, the girl with green hair then asks if she really likes the old dress better, and the main characters answer that that is not the issue. She understands that the dress given by Sven is really beautiful, but she ruins his gift for the second time, and now the girl is a little puzzled, thinking how this could happen. Diana, meanwhile, just smiles and says that the dress must have been a gift from Sven. The main character then wonders how she guessed and replies that she did. The lady with green hair then claims that she heard that they were dancing and that the two are quite close. Diana also claims that His Highness Sven is completely uncharacteristic of caring for a specific person and that they help orphans together. The main character then remembers that this was their excuse at the ball and that it became the basis of their partnership. So now the young lady claims that Mrs. Diana knows about this even though she was not at the ball, and the girl replies that of course she is a highly informed person in high society and there is nothing that she does not know about their aristocracy. Moreover, the young lady claims that her mother and that woman with white hair, whom the girl saved then, were at that ball. The main character then, shocked, asks if it really was her mother. The green-haired alibi, meanwhile, simply grabs her hands and insists that her mother is very grateful to her, as she is her savior. And now Diana claims that she too thanks her from the bottom of her heart. The young lady then claims that the Knight Commander Galt protected her, and His Highness Sven pacified the beast, so she did nothing. The lady with green hair then tells the girl not to be shy because she heard about her brave deed, and she would like to talk to her more, but she thinks that it's time for them to go to the audience because they are already expected. The main character then asks who is waiting, and Diana replies that she will see them soon. So now she invites Lady Rua to have tea next time, and the main character agrees. A little while later, the girl enters the hall where there are knights and servants. The emperor is also there, and he addresses Rua Ristato and states that her contribution was significant, so for her help in eliminating the damage from the demonic beasts, as well as for her help in finding the culprits, he wants to express his gratitude to her. The main character then says that she is flattered by his words, and now the girl understands that, as expected, His Majesty is an influential person and each of his words has its price. At this time, the man only tells the girl to accept any reward and think about it, and also say what she would like. The young lady then considers what she would like from His Majesty, and after some deliberation, she makes her wish known. The girl claims that she would like to obtain the rights to own Baron Rastato's mansion. The emperor is a little surprised after this, and the young lady understands that the noble mansion, whose true owner has fallen into eternal sleep, due to the lack of heirs as Togo and the law demanded, has become the property of the state for the next 10 years. After this period, it belongs to demolition, and this year will be exactly the 10th year. Because of its dark past, as the girl heard, no one lived there, and that day she was unable to visit the temple to find out exactly what happened. But she couldn't even visit the graves because she didn't receive permission from the head priest. The emperor now says that this is how it is. And the girl is the daughter of the baron who owned the estate, and the man then asks if she thinks that the price of this mansion is so high. The main character then replies that he is valuable to her personally, and this is about where she spent time with her family, so if there is a chance, she would like to return him. The young lady understands that this has nothing to do with revenge and is just a small dream that she gave up on long ago. The emperor at this time asserts that he understands and sees no reason for refusal. after which the main character is surprised and thanks him. The man then says he was sure her request would be related to Sven's engagement. The young lady then asks if he is talking about his engagement to His Highness Sven, and wonders if His Majesty would really joke. But he said it was such a serious face, and the man at this time claims that his son is very vigilant thanks to his upbringing, and that he has been like this since childhood. But despite this, every time he mentions Lady Rua, he looks very casual, and perhaps the queen is worried about this. The main character then apologizes for the mistrust, but claims that it would sound too arrogant coming from a person of her status, and now she is a nobody and nothing more than one of many candidates for sainthood. Therefore, she is not suitable for an engagement to His Highness. However, the young lady wonders what this means. After all, she only stated the obvious, but then the girl doesn't understand why she feels so pained. In his chest. The emperor at this time asserts that if only she were not a candidate but a saint, she could become his ideal match. However, the young lady claims that this title has been unclaimed for 10 years and was her pipe dream. The young lady understands that she no longer cares about the saint's position and will try to prevent Ariana from taking it, but she herself doesn't deserve the position, and her main goal now is revenge. The emperor then says that their conversation is over and the protagonists disagree. After which, she heads for the exit and realizes she's been so tense that she's tired. And the girl is even glad that one of her requests will be fulfilled, but now she needs to rest. Because even though she had come all the way to the royal palace, perhaps she should return to the library. However, at that very moment, someone pushes the young lady down the stairs. After which the girl immediately runs away, and the main character wonders if it can't be him and if this is really the girl who poured water on her. Then the young lady realizes she won't be able to keep her balance and will fall. After which he immediately begins to fall down the stairs and closes his eyes, expecting the worst. Well, then Sven grabs her and greets her. After which he claims that he never thought of that she would fall from the sky, and it was good that the girl's hair caught his attention. The young lady then thanks the prince for saving her, but realizes that he mentioned in the morning that he would be busy with formal affairs in the area, but apparently finally returned. The guy also asks if she hit anything. The girl replies that no, and she avoided it thanks to him, and so she is a little puzzled and asks if he can let her go already. But His Highness then asks if she simply stumbled, because if so, he is worried that she might fall again. The girl then doesn't even know what to answer, and the prince wonders if he can also ask why she took off the dress that he gave her, and, in the main game, doesn't answer that she accidentally got it dirty. But the prince then turns to Rua and claims that he's sensitive to lies from others, so such an answer won't work with him. The main character then looks at the prince, and she thinks why there is such a dark aura surrounding him. And she doesn't want him to be too worried. But then the girl apologizes and claims that someone actually poured water on her and her dress got dirty. And just now, someone pushed her too, so it's possible that it was the same person who did it, and that's what she thinks. His Highness then asks the girl if she remembers what the man looked like, and the young lady apologizes but claims that she doesn't know for sure, after which the prince replies that he understands. And perhaps someone unrelated to Lady Torbius has harbored a grudge, so he's thinking of assigning Shiji to her as a guard. And the main character is then surprised and cries out that it is not necessary to take such measures. After all, not so long ago, this was an almost everyday occurrence for her. After these words, Sven only looks sadly at the young lady and says that she has become too accustomed to pain. The guy claims that difficult moments can't always be avoided, but she can talk to him about them. The young lady then asks Sven what he's talking about. But at that moment, someone approaches them. And when he sees the girl, he even drops his apples and then asks, "Is this really Mrs. Rua?" The main character then looks at the guy and asks if he's really Luis. But at that very moment, the young man jumps on her with hugs. And he also cries out that he has been waiting for this meeting for so long. His Highness just looks at all this in shock. And Louis, with tears in his eyes, says that the color of Mrs. Rua's hair has changed. But this does not change the fact that she has become even more beautiful. And he thanks the Lord God that they have met for the second time in this world. The girl, a little puzzled, says that she too is glad to see him again, but asks if he could loosen his grip. His Highness then pulls the guy away and says that this is for sure, after which he asks if he will let the girl go already. After which he asks Rua who this rude, bespectacled guy, Apple, is, since he looks like a hired hand. The main character then wonders why the prince called him that. Louis then bows and cries out that he begs His Highness's forgiveness, and that he had unknowingly behaved very disrespectfully toward him. But the prince then asks if he thinks such a thing is unacceptable and punishable for insulting a member of the royal family. After this, the young man only becomes frightened and asks for mercy. Well, the main character then turns to Sven and tells him not to make threats out of nowhere. The girl then claims that it was Louis and that he really was a hired hand at their estate, and that he also took care of her during her childhood and was just like an older brother. Louis Liston hailed from a small eastern country where he was the first son and heir to the finest store in the country. However, he himself did not show any talent for trading, and so he ran away from his father, who forced him to continue this business, and began looking for work in the kingdom of Zydo. The boy was lucky enough to find his place in the Resto estate, and the young lady's mother is a very hardworking person, so there were always very few servants in their house, and Louis became a new person for the first time in a long time. His father immediately liked him because he was a conscientious worker, and also made excellent baked goods, and the guy looked after her from time to time. Therefore, now, looking at the young man, the girl understands that he has not changed at all, even though 10 years have already passed. And it's such nostalgia that the main character now claims that she was worried about what happened to him after the employer disappeared. And the young man replies that, to be honest, immediately after this unfortunate incident, his father contacted him when he arrived in the city on business, and he returned him to his homeland. However, it was later discovered that his third younger sister had a much greater talent for trade. Because of this, she was recognized as the heir, and he received complete freedom. The main character now understands that this is true, because Louis has 5 younger sisters. The guy then claims that about 6 months ago, he came to this country again and began to serve Lady Diana from the Peridot family. The prince then says that's it, just like this guy works for his brother's fiancée. Louis replies that it's true. And the main character then says that, be that as it may, she is glad that everything is fine with him. And the guy then screams that he should have said this, because after returning home, he was the only one who could helplessly worry about her. But now they have met again, and he needs to tell her something. After which, the young man asks her to listen carefully to what he has to say. He claims that the sudden plunge into eternal sleep has caused Rustado's master, mistress, and youngest son. He always doubted whether this was some person's plan. The young lady then, in shock, asks if he is talking about the plan and claims that they are sick. The guy claims that the cause of their death was a previously unknown disease, but it was likely a crime organized by someone. The young lady is then shocked to think about this, but then asks on what basis he is making such a statement. The guy is about to answer, but at the same time, a couple of maids scream out, "What is this? And who scattered the apples in such a place? You can't even walk there." Louis then apologizes and claims it was him, then says that Mrs. Diana asked him to make an apple pie. The main character then turns to the guy and says that she can help. However, he flatly refuses, saying it's unnecessary, and then asks to be allowed to continue his story later. The young lady then tries to object, but the prince then says that it is better to leave now, and he is sure that the girl is confused. But it is best to take a break now, to calm down and think everything over. Rua then understands that Louis would not say something like that based only on empty assumptions, and he has some reason to suspect someone, so the girl wonders if her relatives were plunged into eternal sleep, not by an illness, but by some person. That's why now the main character is wondering who could possibly need this. At this time, the prince looks at the girl and remains silent. A little while later, the young lady is already lying in her bed and, getting up from it, realizes that so much had happened yesterday that she didn't even have the strength to deal with the projectile. And looking at this dress, the girl understands that it needs to be returned to its original appearance, and then given to Mrs. Diana. The main character also understands that preparations for the birthday celebration will begin tomorrow, and she is interested in who will be chosen as this year's Rose Princess. And she's also worried about what Louis said and the matter with the mansion, so she has so many reasons to worry, and now her Nelidi is wondering if someone really put her family into eternal sleep. At this time, someone knocks on the door, and the young lady then tells him to come in. After which, Shiji comes into the room and wishes Mrs. Rua good morning. He also claims that today he is acting as her guard and will be with her 24 hours a day by order of His Highness Sven. The main character is then shocked and wonders why he did this, but then she remembers that she had already forgotten that someone wanted to harm her. That's why Sven assigned Mr. Shiji to look after her. And he was already overly caring. The boy then hands over the letter and says it's for Lady Rui from the royal palace. The girl then takes the letter in her hands and wonders if she really had to go from the royal palace. After all, if so, then this could be evidence confirming her right to own the mansion. However, when the girl looks at the letter, she screams that there must be some kind of mistake. After this, the girl just rushes to the secret place where she and the prince meet. And when she goes inside, she screams out whether Sven is there, because she needs to clarify something. The prince then only says that it's good that she came, and that he was just admiring the newly blossomed buds of white roses, after which he tells her to look. But the main character claims that she will look at the flowers some other time, because there is something more important to do. After which, she shows this sheet and asks what it means that she was recognized as the Rose Princess of this year. And was it really he who nominated her? The guy then replies that he would like to say that it was exactly like that, but it wasn't him. And the guy thinks this idea came from his brother's fiancée. The main character then wonders if it could really be Mrs. Diana. The young man claims that, moreover, there were many people in the royal palace who supported this decision in connection with the fruitful work in the Redmond case, and the decision was almost unanimous, except for a few individuals. The main character then thinks that, perhaps, one of these individuals was His Highness Sarid. But it is worth noting that it was Mrs. Diana who nominated her candidacy. At this time, the prince asks the girl if she wanted to become a Rose Princess. But the main character says that this is not the issue, and that she is simply the worst candidate for such a prominent role. However, the prince then claims that he thinks Rua is perfect for her, and he wouldn't mind seeing her dressed as a Rose Princess. The main character only looks embarrassed after this, and the guy asks if she thinks this would also be very useful for their revenge plan. The girl asks how this would help with the plan, and the prince claims that this opportunity will publicly raise her status, and her words will carry more weight, playing a significant role in proving the clergyman's crime. The girl replies that this is indeed the case. And in this case, he says that she will play the role of the Rose Princess perfectly and will earn the trust of the audience. Well, then the young lady asks, what about another princess? And the guy then states that unfortunately this year, the person nominated by the temple will be Lady Torbius. The girl is in the temple at this time and turns to Galt, telling him to take a look. After all, this is a special veil that only princesses of her height wear, so the girl asks if she is not beautiful. The guy then turns to Ariana and claims that he understands that the girl wanted to show her to him, but claims that a gang of criminals is rioting in the city. And the Knightly Order received a request for help, because every year, closer to the beginning of the ceremony, there are those who lose their composure. The girl then asks why he is doing this, and the young man thinks that she doesn't understand and says that forcing him to come to her at such a time is a bit too much. After all, as he already said, he has his own responsibilities. And after that, the girl just gets angry and asks if he can't delegate this to his subordinates, and he should have just praised her, because she'll be the princess of the height for the 3rd year in a row. But the guy says that doesn't mean anything. However, the girl then interrupts him and asks what is more important to him, Ari or his duties. The guy then claims that it is not good to force him to choose just one thing. Well, the girl then just gets upset and pretends to cry, after which she claims how insensitive Galt is. After which the young lady asks if he hates her. The guy after that is only surprised and apologizes, after which he claims that he shouldn't have been so rude and of course he doesn't hate her. The young man hugs Ariana. The girl then merely purses her nose and asks if simple words of apology aren't enough, since he hurt Ari. At this time, the girl thinks how sad this is, because they say that Rua will become the second princess of roses, because this is so disgusting. Therefore, the girl understands that she needs to quickly find a way out of this situation and witness for herself how this flawed saint will fall. The main character is with the prince at this time and asks if they will be with Ariana. His Highness then claims that he took countermeasures by assigning Shiji to her, and he thinks that the head of the clergy will not take any rash actions until the ceremony is over. However, he doesn't know what might come into this girl's head, and he shouldn't forget about the ill-wisher who poured water on her and pushed her down the stairs. The guy claims that they will move on to the next stage of the plan immediately after the celebration is over, and he hopes that it will be without incident. The main character then replies that she understands, and then turns to Mr. Shiji and says that she is going back to the beginning, thanks him for agreeing to guard her. The guy then says that there is no need to thank her, because he will do everything possible to protect her. And the prince then claims that she will become the official owner of the mansion immediately after the end of the celebration. And the girl understands that Sven probably spoke about this with His Majesty, and she is also still worried about what Louis said, but now she understands that it is better to concentrate on the primary thing, that is, on her role as the Rose Princess. At this time, the guy claims that he needs to return to the palace and asks if the girl is leaving from there, to which she agrees. And when the young lady and the prince are leaving together, the very same lady who pushed her down the stairs watches from behind a tree. The girl then claims that her master, Sven, is as handsome as ever. Well, she doesn't understand why he's seeing this girl off, since she's not his fiancée. The brunette then thinks that Rua Restado is a bad girl who is fooling Mr. Sven. So now, biting her nails, the brunette understands that she will never recognize such a girl as the Princess of Roses and must drive her away. After which the young lady takes her pendant, and when she opens it, she looks at the photograph of the prince inside. And he asks Togo to just wait a little while. The main character realizes at this point that the birthday celebration lasts 3 days. And the chosen princesses spend the first 2 days going around the capital of the kingdom and distributing roses grown in the temple to the people. The subject who receives the sacred rose does not give it to her until 5 days before the end of the festival, and on the evening of the last day, on the stage of the royal capital, the Rose Princess will perform a melody on the piano. The piece is dedicated to the goddess Rush, and it is believed that she was a great lover of this instrument. After the melody is completed, instead of applauding, the people throw sacred roses, and this is a special tradition of the holiday. So now the young lady understands that handing out roses is not a difficult task, but the problem is playing the piano. After all, since she came to the temple, there has been no opportunity to touch the instrument, so she is going to take a few lessons from the previous Princess Rose. After this, the young lady turns to Sir Shiji and says that you listened, and the guy this time asks if Lady Rua has a request for him. And the girl then says that even if he is assigned to be her guard, he is not obliged to accompany her even here. However, the guy then claims that His Majesty Sven's order was to protect her and not leave her alone for a moment, so now the young lady thinks that the guy is still reliable. And Shiji at this time claims that, however, he should have told her one thing a long time ago, after which he asks to be called simply Shiji. He claims that other polite forms of address are inappropriate. The main character then tries to object, but the boy claims that Madame Rua is a valuable person to His Highness, so he should also treat her with respect and hope that she will treat him accordingly. The young lady wonders what he means by a valuable person, and she is simply an accomplice. After which she says that then in public she will keep the previous treatment. Well, when they are alone, she will call him by name, after which the guy smiles, and he says that let the lady do as she wishes. The main character then says that Shiji is truly ready to do anything for Sven. The boy then claims that His Highness saved his life. Shiji understands that Sven cares for him and tells people that he's from a provincial town in a western country. But in reality, the guy was from the slums and was abandoned on the side of the road, and also survived by swallowing dirt. Overcoming everything, he tried to escape from such a life by adopting knowledge from merchants he met by chance, and gaining experience from hired soldiers. People who called people like him an eyesore accused him of stealing. And once the rich people almost tortured him to the point of falling into eternal sleep. But at that very moment, it was the prince who saved him, and he claimed that he had been following his movements for several unrealistic periods. Because the guy caught his attention while he was on a trip, and the young man is still too talented to fall into a frantic sleep there. Shiji then looked at His Highness in shock, and after that the prince asked the guy if he wanted to serve him, since he had nothing to lose. After which the prince helped the guy get up, and now Shiji claims that from then on, his life belonged to His Highness, and he would carry out any order for the sake of the goal he had set. The main character then realizes that she and Shiji are similar because Sven also extended a helping hand to her. It was then that he gave her a reason to live, so the girl can confidently follow her goal. And now the young lady understands that for the sake of her own retribution, she too must play the role of the Rose Princess perfectly. After which the girl opens one of the doors, but when she enters, she is a little surprised. He thinks that this lady was a Rose Princess. This girl's name is Nern Sandra, and she is the only daughter of Chancellor Sandra, and, like her, is a candidate for sainthood. However, the girl prefers solitude, showing no interest in social life. But despite this, due to her high social status, no one criticizes her as they did, and she carries out her duties with indifference and restraint. Among the candidates at Nern, Sandra is the only one of higher birth than Ariana. And the main character now thinks that she doesn't know at all what kind of person she is. And she can't read minds is probably just her imagination, but it seems that way. The brunette asks if this is Lady Rua Restato. She claims to have received a request from the royal palace asking for clarification on the nuances of the role of the Rose Princess. The protagonist then answers and thanks her in advance for her assistance. But the girl at this time only bites her lip and asks why they chose someone like her. The young lady then apologizes and asks if the girl said something, but she only says that she misheard. Nern then claims her job is to teach the girl how to play the piano, which she'll demonstrate on the last day. But before they begin the lesson, then the girl asks if she can ask her escort to go out. After all, this is a private lesson, intended only for the Rose Princess. The main character then exchanges glances with Shiji and nods, after which the guy says that he will do as they wish and will wait at the door. However, after this, he says that, in case of emergency, he asks him to understand that he will break in without permission. After which the young man says that this is all and asks to be allowed to deviate. The main character then begins to hear the girl's indignation, and the brunette at this time says that she is with Mr. Shiji and also with Mr. Sven. And the girl asks why this little girl gets everything for nothing. Rua, meanwhile, turns to Lady Nirna and asks what happened. The young lady also realizes she heard Sven's name, and the brunette, hearing how they were addressing her, turns around and asks what is going on. But at that very moment, the pendant on her neck breaks off and falls to the ground. The protagonist then bends down and picks it up. But looking at this pendant, I realize that it is very familiar, and it even looks like the stone that the girl who bullied her had. At this moment, the brunette snatches the pendant from the girl's hands and screams for her not to touch it, after which she squeezes the pendant in her hands and only gets angry, and the main character thinks what happened. The girl then asks for forgiveness for such a violent reaction, and then suggests returning to the main problem, and Rua then agrees. But she still understands that without a doubt, this pendant belonged to the one who doused her with water and pushed her down the stairs. However, the main character understands that she cannot judge her with questions having only such an insignificant piece of evidence, and the girl wonders whether the reason for her actions was the fact that the princess and Rose chose her or something else. But the young lady then thinks that, for now, she will keep quiet and see how the situation progresses. The girl at this time claims that there are a number of points that need to be understood in order to learn to play a melody on the piano. After which, Nern extends it, but then says that aristocrats study such melodies during their education. Also last year, Ms. Ariana performed a tune called Thorns of a Rose. She chose a prayerful composition. The protagonist then looks at the notes and realizes that all these melodies are highly complex. Ariana is skilled in dancing and playing the piano. The brunette at this time claims that even if the girl won't play as well as they do, she also comes from a noble family, so she can handle at least one of these. The main character then realizes that this girl is being sarcastic and looking down on her, and isn't even trying to hide it. The girl then claims that she has problems, but that doesn't mean she can't. Rua also claims that her late mother's talent was the talk of the town. The brunette then asks if there were any conversations in social circles, and she had heard that her skills were very poor. And the main character is almost enraged by this and realizes that now the girl is making fun of her mother too. Nern then asks what the girl is going to perform, and the main character says that if she had to choose from these, she would perform a maiden song. The young lady realizes that this is her mother's favorite song, and the brunette at this time asks if she wants to perform such a complex melody and whether it would be better to choose another one. After which she points to one of them, and the main character thinks, isn't this a ballad for children, and if she performs it, she will undoubtedly become a laughingstock. And Nirna at this time thinks that she still doesn't understand why they chose this idiot for the role of the Rose Princess. The girl remembers how she sat next to her father and cried, and also asked why she was the Princess of Roses this year. The royal family chose Rue Restato, not her. The man was addressing his sweet daughter, and he asked her not to cry. He also made changes and claimed that her name had been raised this year, but many votes were cast specifically for this girl. However, the brunette girl then cried out, isn't this girl's healing abilities flawed? And besides, she's an orphan. But she also understood that, despite this, at the reception with the Viscount, Mr. Sven behaved at ease. Despite the fact that she was his fiancé, the young lady's father then approached her and insisted that the girl remember that it was practically impossible to become the Rose Princess 2 years in a row. But the girl then claimed that Mrs. Ariana and the Torbius family were able to do it. And the man then claims that this is all because she enjoys the favor of the head of the temple and has been nominated for several years in a row. But the girl then, still crying, insisted that it was unfair, and that he had promised her that day that she would be plunged into her mother's eternal sleep, that he would do anything for her. The man then apologized to his daughter and claimed he would buy her whatever she needed. So let the girl just heal her wounded soul. He also said that it was already late, so let her go in and rest in her room. After which the young lady goes to her room and realizes that she wants only one thing, and that is Mr. Sven. The girl enters her room and begins to worship the prince. The girl claimed that he always looks only at that girl. She also asked how long she would have to wait for him to look her way. The young lady understood that she didn't need the title of Rose Princess. She was only hoping for her father's help and wanted His Highness to look at her again. She had wanted to see him again since their first meeting. The girl also claimed that she had been his fiancé since the very day he looked at her and smiled. Igor, her thoughts return her to him. The girl also thought that no matter what dirty methods she had to use, she would become a Rose Princess and would undoubtedly please Mr. Sven. The girl then said that she would eliminate Rua Restato at any cost. That's why the brunette is now saying that after Lady Rua, she should at least show a somewhat decent performance, and she can calmly practice on this piano in this room, and she will come again to look at the state of affairs later, so if she does not have an ounce of confidence, then she can refuse. The main character then realizes she was constantly bullied at the temple, and she lacked the courage for that. Even just looking at her as if she were worthless, the girl is sure the brunette will refuse. And even now she can't answer her properly. And the brunette is now saying that they'll see each other then. At this time, Shiji enters the room and addresses Mrs. Rua, after which he says that there is a strong sense of hostility from that respected candidate, and that she may be a threat to her, so the guy asks whether he should report this to His Highness Sven. Well, the young lady then replies that no, and there is no point in bothering Sven with something like that. The girl understands that the brunette insulted not only her, but also her mother. Therefore, now the young lady claims that she will pay her back in the same coin, but in her own way, and the girl understands that she will never forgive her and will return to her the same pain that she caused her, as well as humiliation. Now the main character turns to Shiji and says she has only one request. The brunette realizes at this point that she's not interested in simply beautiful things, and since childhood, she's been drawn to those that are, in some way, evil. These could have been cursed dolls, pictures painted with human red fluid, or the jewels of executed kings. The girl only asked her father for things with an interesting backstory on the day she met Mr. Sven. Nicknamed the unwanted child, she was struck by the gloomy coldness of his image. Hidden behind a graceful exterior, the boy then asked if this was the minister's daughter, Nern Sanda. He also said that he was pleased to meet the girl, who understood that it was something she understood the moment Mr. Sven smiled at her. This is what he is also very much a novel to her, because it was a mental connection and someone who can understand Mr. Sven. Only she was, and only she would be suitable for the role of his bride, and only she could be it. It can be said that from that day on they never met again, and the girl humbly waited for him to come and take her when the time came. However, now she is wondering why the guy chose someone else, because this defective saint only wants to cause him more pain. But now the brunette thinks that it would be okay if she refused the role of the Rose Princess. But 3 weeks have passed since then, and there are only 3 days left until the celebration, and in the end, there is no talk of this girl's proper performance. But suddenly the young lady hears a melody and wonders if it's really called Applause in Broad Daylight. The melody is quite complex, with its passages and fast rhythm, and even she can't sing it. And the girl thinks how perfect it is, but at the same moment she starts running and wonders if this is really that girl. After which she immediately bursts into the room and screams why Lady Rua is playing this. The main character then greets Mrs. Nern, although she says that she thinks it is not very polite to suddenly come in and interrupt a person's game. The brunette only becomes furious after this, but then still throws the notes from the stand. After which she screams out why someone like her is able to perform such a melody. The main character then exchanges glances with Shiji, but then turns to Lady Nurna and replies that, to be honest, she learned this melody at the age of 7 and it was the last melody, which her mother taught her shortly before her death. The young lady understands that she didn't want to choose this particular composition, but Lady Diana recommended it. The lady with green hair asked the girl if she wanted her instruction on playing the piano, and the main character asked for forgiveness for contacting her so suddenly, but claimed that she came to return the dress and talk about it alone. The girl recalls how Shiji claimed that among the aristocrats, Lady Diana possessed particularly outstanding abilities. The lady with green hair then replied that her performance was undoubtedly approved, even by Mr. Sarid himself. After which the girl turned to Louis and asked what he would say, to which the guy shouted that of course he agreed. But then he asked to be allowed to say that Lady Rua was also very good at playing the piano in her childhood years, and she was a very talented child, known for the outstanding abilities inherited from her mother. Rua then said that Louis was exaggerating, and the guy only smiled warmly in response. The main character then said that, be that as it may, her skills have since declined and she needs to quickly get them back and also make it in time before her performance as the Rose Princess, so she hoped Lady Diana could offer her some advice. The green-haired girl only laughed afterward, insisting there was someone she didn't want to give in to, and asking if that was true. And this girl is also a Rose Princess. After which, Diana grabbed the main character's hand and screamed about the rivalry between the two girls. After which she cried out that if she were going to take it on, she needed to polish it to perfection, and she needed to start by choosing a winning melody. Time was running out, so training had to be as intense as possible from morning to night. The main character then only cried out that she was counting on her help, but Diana claimed that her management would be strict and asked whether the girl would carefully follow the instructions. The main character smiled after this and claimed that she had already experienced all types of pain. That's why she won't give up so easily. And that's why Rua now claims that she won't give up the title of Rose Princess and will play her role until the very end. After all, a person who can only cause pain to others is not fit for the title of Saint or Princess of Roses. The brunette then became very angry and clutched her pendant with the image of His Majesty. She turned and ran to the door. Shiji then turned to Lady Rua and said that she had done an excellent job, because her execution and her firm stance were just as they should be. The main character then states that she hopes Lady Nern will now give in peacefully, and the brunette at this time is rushing along the corridor and thinking why this happened. and it's terrible, so she doesn't understand why it looked like she lost. The girl then went into the rose garden and opened her pendant with the image of Mr. Sven. She asked me to console her. At that moment, Ariana appeared behind the girl, and she cheerfully approached her and then asked what Nern was doing there. The girl then turned around in shock and asked if it was Mrs. Ariana. And the blonde then replied that yes, and it was her, and she also saw everything that she did there. The brunette was in shock and didn't even know what to say, but Ariana said that everything was fine and that there was nothing wrong with that. After all, Nirna is such a wonderful girl, and the one who is really bad is the one standing in Rua's way. The brunette then asked if she was bad, and Ariana answered her that yes, and the one who makes mistakes is Rua, and Nern does everything right. Nern then, as if in a trance, began repeating that this was true, and that the girl was on the wrong side. The blonde then responded that yes, and that's why she needed to be destroyed. But Nern then claimed that there were only 3 days left until the celebration, and that stripping her of her title of Princess of Roses was almost impossible, and that Sir Siji was protecting her. The blonde then told the girl to think carefully, and although it is impossible to deprive her of the title, the girl can still eliminate Ru. After all, there is undoubtedly a period of time when the guard leaves. That's why now the blonde only whispers in Nirna's ear that she will definitely be able to remove this eyesore. A little while later, the days of celebration arrived, and the main character, looking at the carts with roses, understands that she must distribute them all to the residents within 2 days, so she realizes that it seems like it will be more difficult than she expected. After which, the girl thinks that Lady Ariana has probably already begun her duties, and the main character thinks that when they passed each other in the hallway, she behaved surprisingly normally. The girl said that the long-awaited beginning of the celebration had finally arrived, and they are both rose princesses, so the young lady offered to try equally. The main character just looked at this girl with distrust and understood that she was probably planning something. After all, despite the fact that they are both rose princesses, they rarely cross paths, as they replace each other in the city every other day, so the next time they will meet only on the last day when they play the piano, and the girl wonders if everything will really happen there. But she still doesn't understand what the blonde has prepared and whether she should worry. At this time, Shiji turns to Mrs. Rua and says that it is time for them to go. The main character then agrees, but realizes that she is still nervous about going to the city. After which she asks if Shiji will accompany her now. The guy then claims that 2 more nights are assigned to the lady, but he will still follow the decree of His Highness Sven. At this time, the prince also appears and says that this is for sure, and the guy will follow his orders, and the main character is a little surprised and says that they have not seen each other for so long because of his business with delegates from other countries, after which he asks if he is also busy today. And the prince asks if she is talking about those ill-mannered messengers who suddenly visited them, declaring that they were interested in their traditional state holidays. However, they are more interested in a wild lifestyle, so they are nothing but a nuisance. And his brother wanted to dump the ambassador's role on him, but he forced him to do it himself and fled. The main character then thinks that His Highness Sarid must have been furious. Meanwhile, Sven claims he was on the brink of death from loneliness and couldn't meet her. The young lady now says he's exaggerating. At this point, the guy turns to Shiji and says that, unlike him, he can be with a girl all the time. Shiji doesn't even know what to say and apologizes. But the young lady then tells the guy not to apologize, after which she turns to Sven and tells him not to tease him. The main character also thinks why everything is like this when she is next to Sven. She can breathe a sigh of relief. The young lady's nerves had been on edge for the past few days, all because she hadn't been able to meet Sven. But it seems she was lonely. At this time, the guy claims that he thinks it's time for him to go back, and he's even glad that he was able to meet before leaving. After all, he wanted to see her in her rose princess outfit up close. The guy also claims that she is the most beautiful rose princess he has ever seen, so let her greet the people with her head held high. The prince then kisses her hand and states that he is looking forward to her performance. Then he says goodbye and says that they will see each other again. And the young lady, watching him leave, understands that the guy always dispels her worries. When His Highness passes by Shiji, they only exchange glances, and Shiji nods as a sign that he understands everything. A little while later, the main character is already distributing flowers, and people are happy about it. When a young lady hands over flowers, she says that may blessings come with them. However, when the girl looks at her basket, she realizes that she hasn't even given away half of it yet. And it seems like it will take a little more time, and I also wonder how things are going with Ariana. At this time, Shiji turns to Lady Rua and claims that some individuals may take advantage of the opportunity and attack her. But the knights are also not updated with experience in such things, so he will definitely do everything to protect her, but still asks her not to let down her guard. But then the main character sees a guy who just stole someone's wallet, after which she says he's fast, and most likely a pickpocket. Shiji replies that he is, and the young lady understands that this guy deftly avoids the knights, gaze, and must be a professional. Shiji then wants to say that he will deal with him, but the young lady replies that there is no need for him to interfere in the matter with this petty criminal, and if she uses her position, she can deal with the situation without making it worse. That's why the girl tells Shiji not to forget that he is her guard. After which, the young lady moves on, and he offers the pickpocket the rose too. The guy just turns around and says no, and then wants to say something else. Well, the main character says that it's in honor of the holiday. After which she touches his hand and tells the guy not to be shy, but at the same moment he begins to feel very dizzy, and he thinks what happened because everything is swimming before his eyes. After which the guy falls, and his bag also opens when he falls, and other people's wallets start falling out. People look at it in shock, and one of them asks if it's his wallet, and the other lady thinks it's her ring. Another one claims that he should be there too, after which they scream for the pickpocket to be detained. And the main character, after leaving, snaps her fingers and realizes that usually the security here doesn't work so badly, but as Shiji said, it's all because of the holiday. At this time, someone else turns to the young lady and apologizes, but says that it was she who helped catch this pickpocket. The girl says that it seems that the lady's activities are still fruitful, and when the main character turns around, she asks in shock if this is really it. Charlotte. The girl then says that they haven't seen Mrs. Rua for a long time. And the main character then claims that she is glad to see her in good health, after which she asks if it is Mr. Allen, who is the baker, who is next to her. The guy then replies that yes, and his wife helped him a lot in this matter, and the young lady asks if he is talking about his wife. After which Charlotte says that, to tell the truth, after the lady resolved that incident with Redmond, Allen did propose to her, and they got married just recently. The main character then asks if this is true, and then congratulates them. The girl, meanwhile, claims that the proceeds were given to Redmond's victims. Or perhaps their families, so many were able to advance a little thanks to this, and since then, the damage caused by magical beasts has completely disappeared. And now, Charlotte claims that all this is thanks to Madame Rue and His Highness Sven. The girl now claims that it was Mrs. Rua who healed not only their physical but also their emotional wounds. Therefore, she is a truly respected saint. The main character only laughs after this and says she's exaggerating. However, she thinks that it is still strange because she cannot believe that it was she who healed their wounds, using a power that is only meant to cause pain. Now the girl also remembers that she is handing out flowers, and she tells them to take one rose for each of them so that they can take one too. After which he hands them over, and Charlotte then thanks him on behalf of the lady and says that she will still have a performance on the last day, and she will throw this white rose when it is her turn to perform. The main character then asks how this is possible, and the girl claims that Mrs. Rua probably hasn't heard about this, since it is a custom that arose naturally among the people. And she thinks that tomorrow another rose princess will give them a rose. Well, at the end of the performance, people choose the one from the two roses they have in their hands, which was given to them by a more respected princess, and then the flower is thrown into the air. Alan then says that it looks like a vote, and the young lady then thinks that's how it is, and she didn't even know that a flower is a voice. The guy then claims that the criteria for evaluation are things like good or bad piano playing, or the number of good deeds performed as a candidate for sainthood, and that this is decided by people. The girl then understands that the fact that the people gave the majority of votes for one candidate does not mean that this will have an impact on anything, but be that as it may, it is a sign of popular support and could have a positive impact on their plans in the future. Charlotte, meanwhile, cries out that they will support Mrs. Rue with all their might, and Alan will definitely throw her a white rose too. The guy then replies that yes, he will definitely do that too. And the main character, watching these two, understands that no matter what, she is glad to see them happy. The next day, in the same place, a lady with tight hair is distributing roses. She also tells them to leave her after playing the piano. And also, that it was a yellow rose. Glenn, meanwhile, watches Ari and realizes he's glad she's in a good mood. But when the girl saw the huge amount of growth, she began to complain that it was more than last year, but she was still kind to children and the elderly. So after all, Ariana is a kind girl. At this moment, the guy also hears someone crying. It turns out to be a child, and Galt then approaches him and asks what's wrong and if something is wrong. The boy's mother then only asks if it's Lord Galt, after which he apologizes but claims that the matter is related to the prose they were just given, and it seems to have thorns on it. That's why the child hurt his finger. At this time, Galt leans over to the boy and tells him to let him take a look, after which he states that the wound is not very deep, but then asks if he wants to be examined by the Rose Princess. After all, she is a good candidate and will definitely heal the wound properly. However, the boy then claims that the princess is scaring him, so he shouldn't. His mother immediately tries to calm him down. Galt looks at the two with a bit of surprise. The woman then apologizes and claims that her son was attacked by a magical beast last year and seriously injured. Then they turn to the temple for help, and the first one who responded at that moment was that Rose Princess. However, when the woman asked if the venerable candidate for sainthood could heal her child, the girl just looked at them with disgust, after which she turned away and claimed that with such a serious condition, Ari probably wouldn't be able to help. The woman then said it couldn't be, and the boy then grabbed the veil that was tied around the girl's head. The boy's mother then desperately asked that the honorary candidate for sainthood save her son. However, the blonde then only furiously snatched the veil from the boy's hands and screamed for him to let go. And he also didn't dare stain her veil. After which she too left, and the girl screamed that she couldn't have helped anyway. And now the woman claims that after this, another respected candidate came running and healed him. But now the boy is screaming that the princess isn't kind and couldn't heal him, and is angry. The woman then tries to calm her son down and tells him to stop screaming, after which she asks for forgiveness, and tells Lord Galt not to attach any importance to this conversation. The young man then agrees, and the mother and the boy leave after that, and the woman tells her son that they can patch up such a wound themselves at home, so they offer to go. And then Galt thinks, what does this mean? And after all, the difference in the candidates' abilities is small. So now he wonders if that family really meant Ariana. But this girl healed his grave wounds, and Ari couldn't abandon people who asked for help. Well, then the guy, looking at her, thinks whether it was really she who saved him. At this time, the main character thinks that yesterday was full of difficulties and worries, and it was the second day of the festival, so now the girl understands that today she will have almost no free time. At the same moment, someone turns to the second Rose Princess and says that it seems she is not handing out roses now, and also asks if she is taking a break. The boy also cries out for the Rose Princess to look at them, and the main character only smiles and waves. The girl understands that even when she plays the role of the Rose Princess and gets closer to the people, she is still followed by security, which greatly limits her freedom of movement. The young lady also understands that she received a government subsidy for her performance as the Rose Princess, and she naively thought that she would find time to do some shopping, but now the girl still thinks that she can still find something useful in the shops. Then the main character's gaze catches something, after which the girl approaches the stall, and he takes one of the bottles and then says how beautiful it looks. The girl realizes that this red shade is similar to the color of Sven's eyes. Meanwhile, the salesman asks if this is really the Rose Princess and tells her to come in and not be shy. Then the guy also asks if she likes the item. He just recently bought it from the merchants. And this thing is a perfume made from a rare flower that grows only in the southern island state. And not only the bottle is amazing, but also the scent itself. So now the guy asks to smell it, and when the young lady does so, he understands that she agrees, because it smells great. And it feels not only fresh, but also sweet, so it reminds her of Sven even more. The young man at this time claims that he was told that this scent is loved by noble men of that island, so this thing can be a good gift. The young lady then thinks whether she can give this to Sven. But up until this point, she had only received gifts, and the guy had given her dresses and accessories. At this time, Shiji turns to the young lady and asks if she is by any chance thinking about His Highness Sven, but the main character is only frightened by such a sudden question. After which she becomes embarrassed and replies that if she hadn't answered, she wouldn't have bothered a member of the royal family over something like that. Shiji then claims that His Highness is reluctant to use perfume, but he has long been interested in the culture of the Southern Islands and also hopes to someday establish diplomatic relations with them. The main character then asks if this is true and, looking at the bottle in her hands, says that then he should like it too. And Shiji then claims that, to begin with, he can note that His Highness will be glad to receive any gift from her. The young lady then asks if this is true, and Shiji says again that he will be glad. After which the main character thinks for a moment and then says that she'll take it then. The girl understands that this is a simple expression of gratitude and there's nothing strange about it. When the young lady is already leaving the shop with a wrapped gift, she sees that something is happening nearby and she asks what is going on there. And then Shiji tells the lady to wait, because he will go and check first. Afterwards, the guy approaches the crowd and apologizes, but then asks what the noise is about. One of the people then replies that there's a drinking contest going on in front of the bar, and this is also the custom of this festival. After which he claims to bet that this year, as always, Malta from the butcher's shop will win. But he also says that the strange young lady in the hood is frighteningly strong. The main character then wonders if similar events are really taking place in the city. Well then, looking at one of the participants, he understands that this inveterate drunkard is, after all, Mrs. Diana. And if you look closely, you can see that man in the back is Louis. After which, the main character approaches him and asks what they're doing in such a place. But the guy then just smiles and asks if he was really able to see Mrs. Rua. And the Rose Princess outfit suits her so well, so her image will definitely go down in history as the best. However, the main character then turns to the boy and tells him to ignore it and explain himself. The young man then asserts that, frankly speaking, he initially acted as the younger prince His Highness Sarid once did. I planned to take Mrs. Diana with me to secretly watch the festivities, and at first Mrs. Diana enjoyed the time spent. But then His Highness Sarid became busy receiving guests, and Lady Diana offered him her help. However, His Highness Sarid merely told her to go and enjoy the festivities alone. Louis also says that Lady Diana became angry and has since behaved in a manner unbecoming of an aristocrat, and the main character realizes that His Highness Sarid has no understanding of a woman's heart. But she still understands that everything turned out this way, because Sven imposed his eccentricity on him. So now the girl asks if he's the only one accompanying her, and he replies, of course. And the ducal family's elite guards are lying in wait in various locations. Louis also says that he couldn't even handle Lord Lewitt, and Mrs. Rua should know this better than anyone. The girl then realizes that this is the name of her late brother, whom she hasn't heard for a long time. But the young man was still very little then. Louis, seeing the face of the main character, says that after the end of the celebration, he would like to agree on a place for their meeting and sort out one issue. After all, it concerns the death of her family, or the girl might think he's planning to mislead her with this cruel joke. But the main character then replies that his concerns are unnecessary. After all, after the celebration, she intends to make a statement, so let the guy explain everything to her properly. Lewis then turns to Ms. Rua and tells her that she's only grown stronger over the years. The girl then clenches her fists, realizing that revealing the truth will only bring her pain. Then she'll accept it and move on. A little while later, the girl approaches the stage with the piano, and he realizes that this is the beginning of the last day of the celebration. People are already gathering around the stage, and one of the girls says that the final part of the celebration has finally arrived. The guys also talk among themselves, and one of them says that his friend should not forget to throw a rose, and the other guy then replies that of course he will not forget because this is the main part of the celebration. After this, the priest comes on stage and asks everyone for silence. One of the girls in the crowd then points out that it's the head of the clergy speaking, and the guy insists it looks elegant. The man then claims that the damage caused by magical monsters in recent years has taken a great toll on the population, and thanks to the dedicated efforts of the temple, the death toll has been reduced. But he is sure that people felt terrible. But that is why the temple and the holy candidates at it exist. That's why they can safely spend the last day of the festival this year. Afterwards, the man, with a smile on his face, cries out for them to be grateful for the temple's existence. And they will be faithful to the goddess Rush. The people then cry out that the Lord High Priest is right, and that he always thinks of the people. The main character then realizes that the High Priest, as always, is a seemingly good person, and is making performances to save people's souls, and of course does not forget to incite people's faith in the goddess. But they have no idea that it is this guy who is behind the scenes directing all the attacks of the magical beasts, and they will definitely remove this mask from him. At this time, someone turns to the Rose Princess and states that there will be a piano performance, right after which he tells her to come to him so that they can finish her costume, and the main character agrees. After which she turns to Shiji and says she's leaving. The guy then agrees and says he'll wait for her near the stage. But when the main character enters the room where her suit is supposed to be adjusted, she is a little surprised. After all, she sees Ariana there. The girl also understands that there haven't been any more attacks until today, but she thinks she can't relax. Ariana turns to Rua and asks if it's her, then asks what happened, since she has such a frightened look on her face. The girl also asks, smiling, if she's nervous before the performance. Ariana also claims that Rua will be performing after her, so the comparison is inevitable. But then, with a smile on her face, she adds that she's different from Rua in that way. That she has a home, that she can return, and that she can be called a worthy, educated aristocrat. The protagonist then realizes that her contempt for her is completely natural. Meanwhile, the blonde says that everything is fine, because if Rua performs well, she will definitely get at least a few roses. The main character then thinks what this is, and that this whole situation is a country, and the blonde at this time just heads to the stage and says that therefore, Rua also should not lose heart and play. But the young lady then turns to Ariana and asks if she can listen to just one thing, after which the blonde turns around and asks what she is talking about. And the main character then claims that when she first came to the temple, the girl spoke to her so kindly and then asked if she remembered. Rua remembers how other girls said that she was from the family of the Marquis Ristato, and in fact, the mother of one girl told her that only Rua remained alive. And another girl also claimed that it would turn out that her abilities were a defect. After all, the high priest had said so. The purple-haired lady then said that she didn't even want to go to the temple with such a girl at the same time. The main character realized then that she no longer had a home. But at that very moment, someone approached her and spoke to her. It was Ariana, and she asked if the girl's name was Rua. The main character only stuttered and said yes, a little frightened. The blonde then said the girl made a good impression, after which she declared she wanted to be friends with her. Malenko also extended her hand and claimed to be from the family of Count Torbius. And her name is Ariana Torbiaz. The girl also said she was glad to meet Rua, and the main character now understands that the girl's smile reassured her at that moment. But now Rua asks if the girl really expected to exploit her back then. And the blonde then replies that she did say she was impressed. And then she meant that the girl gives the impression of being a person who is easy to use. Rua is now in shock thinking about this, and the blonde at this time says that she also talked about this, and she said that the girl was a good toy and also entertainment. So now the young lady asks the girl if she thinks anyone would want to be equal friends with a defective holy orphan and starts laughing out loud, asking if that's not funny. And Rua is still such a slow thinker. The main character then replies that it's okay and she understands because the girl has been like this since childhood. Rua realizes that in such a bad mood, she could easily lose control and grab Ariana's hand. But what she desires most now is to shed light on her sins and the high priest's true nature. She also understands that she desires a flawless place and must not be led by emotions. She must continue to conceal her power and bide her time. At this time, the priest finishes his speech and says that now the people should enjoy the performance of the first Princess of Roses, and the blonde then understands that this is her entrance, after which she says that they need to hurry. And when the girl leaves, the main character tells her that one day the day will come when she will be repaid for all her sins, after which she only louder declares that it will be her doing. And the blonde, leaving, only smiles and wishes her luck with it. But then he thinks that this will only work if Rua lives to see this moment. Meanwhile, the black-haired lady is around the corner, laughing. She also claims that when Lady Ariana's performance ends, it will be Rua's turn, and that will be the perfect opportunity to attack. The girl then recalls the blonde saying they must eliminate this eyesore. And now the brunette only agrees, and also claims that there is no way to interfere there, because she must erase from her life the people who are taking Mr. Sven away from her. To this end, on the eve of the celebration, she secretly rigged the stage with a simple system. If the rope were pulled, the stage would collapse, trapping the performer underneath. It will be just an unfortunate accident that happened during Lady Rua's performance, and now Nern just keeps smiling and says that she longs to hear the last game of this Rua Restato and will arrange a requiem for her. Ariana is playing the piano at this point, and everyone is delighted, commenting on how graceful it is. Someone asks if this, dear candidate for the saint's place, wasn't there a Princess of Roses last year and the year before, and, perhaps, she's the closest thing to a saint. At this point, the blonde realizes that she loves it when so many people's eyes are on her, and all this applause is meant for her. Then the girl finishes playing the piano and bows, and the girl then thinks that soon she will receive a place as a saint. After Ariana's performance, Rua takes the stage. She realizes that Ariana's performance was, of course, filled with confidence, and she's next. The young lady also wonders if Sven is also somewhere there, and will hear her performance too. The main character tries very hard to play this melody, but she wonders what she is thinking about, because the guy is now too busy to waste time on something like that. The brunette at this time only cries out that now the time has come, and let Rua Restato finally plunge into eternal sleep. However, when the girl is about to pull the rope, Shiji suddenly snatches it, and the girl is then shocked and wonders how he found out about this. But then someone else turns to Lady Sandra and says she's gone too far. It turns out to be His Highness, and he then asks, "Is the girl really one of those people who makes a fuss during a great performance?" The brunette is shocked, unable to understand what to do next, and cries out, "Is it really Mr. Sven?" The guy then merely claims that he heard from Shiji that the lady tried to harm Ruya, and first she poured water on her, and then pushed her down the stairs, and in the royal palace. Something like that cannot go unnoticed. And although, apparently, Rua wanted to sort this out without his involvement, Shiji now claims he owes the mistress an apology. He was merely following His Highness's orders to report everything. The brunette is terrified after this and cries out that it's all just a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, the prince insists that they also found out about what the girl was about to do, and that Shiji found the equipment and dealt with it. After which His Highness asks if the girl understands that even if she pulled the rope, the stage would not collapse. The girl then screams in shock that it was all a mistake and she doesn't remember anything being done to the scenery, because she was simply curious about what that rope was doing there. Nern also cries out, asking His Highness to believe her, because she is his bride. But the guy then only says that he doesn't remember her being his fiancée. He then turns to Shiji and asks if he's engaged to this girl. The guy then asks him to let him say, with all his confidence, that this statement is false. The young lady then asks in shock what he is talking about and says only that it is a mistake because Mr. Sven loves her, and the girl then desperately screams, asking if by breaking up their first meeting, she was not the reason for his completely sincere smile. Sven then just smiles and says that it's hard for Minister Sandrew with such a stupid daughter and to believe that his own family is dragging him down in such a difficult time. The girl then simply asks what he means by saying she's difficult. The boy then asserts that the royal court has repeatedly expressed the opinion that it's time for the minister to pass on his post to the next person. The girl then cries out in surprise, wondering if they're talking about her father's resignation. Meanwhile, His Highness insists that in his earlier years, he was truly more than worthy of his post. But his current actions prove that this is a thing of the past, and it is obvious that his priority has become not the well-being of the people, but his own benefit. And, moreover, a successor has already been found, and his candidacy was approved by the decree of his brother. But Minister Sander did not want to lose power. Their king, who is Sven's father, entrusted this matter to his brother. But the behavior of the minister's daughter, which is about to be made public, will put everything in its place. The girl is then shocked and frightened, wondering if things are really that bad. Meanwhile, the prince insists that it would be a good idea to make his brother his debtor. The brunette then, with tears in her eyes, asks Mr. Sven to have mercy on her, after which she opens her pendant and asks him to look at it. And he also cries out that as he sees, she is devoted to him and loves him, and after all, they are connected with fate, and she also did all this for him. However, after that, the guy only coldly asks if she really did it for him. After which, Palish claims that he doesn't like clingy people. And the young lady asks what Mr. Sven is talking about. Well, she also understands that she is very scared, because the guy is looking at her as if she is just an obstacle in his path. His Highness at this time claims that if the girl were not the daughter of Minister Sandra, you would have no value to him, but she will soon lose even this value. And the guy claims that he let her get away with insults towards Rua, but now she also tried to hurt the girl, so now he is quite angry. The girl then falls to her knees and says that she begs him to forgive her. But the prince then replies that he fears that any attempt to harm the princess will be met with immediate punishment. And the girl will never see him again, after which the prince snaps his fingers, and at the same moment several knights take the young lady away. The girl then screams for them to let her go, after which she turns to Mr. Sven several more times. However, the guy then only turns to Lady Nirna Sandra and says goodbye to her. The girl then looks desperately at the prince, and at that very moment her hand with the pendant loosens. The girl realizes she knew she was charming him. It was precisely that dark coldness that had always been hidden behind the guy's beauty, but he turned out to be a much more terrible person than she thought. And the girl was mistaken from the very beginning, so now she only screams in horror. At this time, the prince turns to Shiji and says that for him too, this was quite a worry, but the guy then replies that no, and it was an order from His Highness, but it was quite easy since Mrs. Sandra left a lot of evidence, and if Lady Torbius had been in her place, this would not have happened. After all, this girl is clever, and she's as difficult an opponent as their leader of the clergy. His Highness then declares that he will no longer allow them to do whatever they please. And Shiji bows and says that he will do as His Highness wishes, but then he asks, what about the punishment of Lady Sandra? Because even though she has fallen so low, she is still a candidate for the place of the saint, who played the role of the Princess of Roses. So the guy asks if it would be fair to send her to a local small church, since she has no other place as a saint, and that's where they usually send problematic candidates. And the prince then says it's time to talk openly about resigning. After all, the minister could have retained his position after leaving office if he had obediently retreated after losing his wealth and power. Parent and child have no choice but to swallow their pride and move to the countryside. But then the prince hears applause, after which he says, it seems Ms. Rua has finished her performance. Then the guy also looks a little downcast and says that he didn't listen at all, and maybe next time he'll ask Rua to play just for him. At this time, Shiji asks His Highness what about duets with the violin, because since he plays the strings so well, he thinks that this is a wonderful idea. The guy only smiles after this and then says that it is decided, but before that, he states that he must pay tribute to Ruya. Meanwhile, people are saying that the White Rose Princess's performance was simply wonderful. One of the girls then replies that she thinks it's the best she's heard in years, and the melody is quite complex. One of the guys then says that he doesn't know how a professional would rate this performance, but this melody even touched him, because it's beautiful, but there's also something sad in it. The girl then takes a white rose and says that she thinks she can vote for this lady princess once, and the guy then says that he will too, and if he does throw away the white rose, well, the other guy then says that he also wants to throw away the yellow rose, because this girl's performance was daring and bright, so they don't even know who to choose. At this point, Charlotte simply exclaims that Madame Roy performed beautifully and that only a white rose can be thrown there. After which, she also exclaims that Madame Roy is the best. Alan then turns to Charlotte and tells her to tone it down. Meanwhile, the main character is still on stage. And Ariana, looking at her, understands that all her joy has evaporated after she heard the enthusiastic exclamations addressed to Rui, and it seems that Nern has made a mistake. But she thought that this girl was useless, and she'll probably mention her name later as the instigator. Well, the young ladies still think nothing terrible will happen, because no one will pay attention to the ravings of a gloomy madwoman. And the blonde now thinks that if this girl is a pawn, she should at least be of use to the queen. At this point, the priest also comes on stage and announces that this celebration is over. And in order to praise the Rose Princesses for decorating this holiday with their performances, he asks them to throw their roses into the air, after which people begin to throw roses. And if you look at them all, you'll see that the number is roughly the same, but there are still more white roses. Some people then say that the Rose Princesses' performances were wonderful, and others say they're already looking forward to next year. Galt then looks at the entire crowd and wonders if the celebration is really over. He then sees a yellow rose lying on the floor and thinks he can breathe a sigh of relief. Although there were some minor annoyances, everything went off without any major incidents. After which the young man picks up this rose, and when he smells it, he realizes that Ari's performance was also wonderful, but he was hooked by the melody of Lady Restato, and yet he cannot see in her the ugly candidate who mocked Ari. And also, apparently, there are citizens who ardently support her, and he sees that there are white roses. Still, the guy thinks back then that it was Ari who healed him, but now he just shakes his head and thinks it's all wrong, and he never doubted his fiancée. Therefore, now the young man understands that he should ask Ari herself, and he will share his suspicions with her and also praise her performance. A little while later, the guy already enters the room where the lady with blonde hair is, after which he turns to Ari and says that But at that very moment, the guy sees the girl pouring a glass of water on the maid and is very surprised. At this point, the blonde just screams that she said she wanted to drink and asks if such disgusting water can be poured into her mouth. After which she also screams for the woman to bring the fruit. And at the same moment, she agrees and runs away apologizing. But the blonde wouldn't calm down and turned to another maid, asking if she hadn't said she was tired and that they couldn't even get a chair ready. Then the other maid brought it to her and said she'd be right back. Ariana then sits down on the chair and becomes very angry. She realizes that this performance is a complete disappointment, and even though the score hasn't been finalized yet, it's clear that there were more white roses. That's why the girl thinks in what place Rua's meager performance was better. And they are all just blind fools. Therefore, Ariana thinks that His Holiness would sooner carry out his plan, and she would finally become a saint. Galt then approaches the blonde and addresses her, but the girl then turns to him in tears, after which she screams for him to console the unfortunate Ari. The girl then throws herself into his arms and claims that she is so annoyed that she gave in to Rua, and that it was all Rua who bullied her, and the girl definitely pulled some kind of dirty trick. The guy is a little surprised but says that's one of the reasons he came and that's what he wanted to know. But the blonde then turns to Galt and cries out that he, of course, thinks that Ari's performance was better. The guy is then even more surprised and says that no, neither does he. However, the girl then, with tears in her eyes, says how cruel this is, since he's not on her side either. The young man is shocked and doesn't even know what to do, but he understands that if things continue like this, he won't be able to question Ari, and now he realizes that it seems he'll have to find out for himself what they're hiding from him. Meanwhile, the girl starts hitting Galt, after which she screams what a fool he is, and the guy then claims that he is to blame and asks Ari to stop crying.